Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Maria. So let's call to order the public portion of the February 12th, 2026 meeting. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Do we need a, do we need another roll call? No. Okay, so we're right.
Reopen the meeting before the close.
That's right, that's right. Thank you. Always forget that.
Yeah.
So first piece is for public input. Floor is open to anyone here in the room or online. And it's *7, *6, *7, *9. I think for folks on the phone. *6, *9.
I have an issue I'd like to raise. We have, I think, roughly 5 business licenses. And if you go and search VRBO or any of those similar services, you'll find a lot more properties than 5 listed for as being available for short-term rentals and Hideout. I'd like to see us tackle that for 2 reasons. The first is we're missing out on a business license. Secondly, we're missing out on the revenue. Is it possible? Do we have like the treasurer or somebody who can just do a search on VRBO and Hideout addresses and reach out to those people and say, you know, you need a business license to do this. We believe you've been renting for a while. This is a problem. We want you to, you know, to resolve this. Is that something we can get at? Because we're missing out on revenue and we're missing out on really understanding what's going on inside of our own town.
Yes, so the legislature passed a rule whereby we could police, so.
Good. Okay. Terrific.
I'm totally
Great
agreeing
idea.
because I've seen some examples of where some folks are not doing the things that they should be doing. So I think, you know, part of this might be, how do we do that? You know, do we hire someone? Do we run, you know, hire someone with some kind of model that looks at all that VRBOs and the other pieces, and that's how I found one. I just did, you know, search and said this person's not paying, you know, they are.
So Jan, I'm not familiar with the, say, bill just passed on that, last year, I assume?
No, last year, actually.
Yeah,
So-
last year.
We need to look at the parameters, because.
Yeah, so like, because VRBO and other organizations like that are actually required to collect the sales tax as part of their deal. And that's the easy way to get sales tax from these, they even get maybe retroactive sales tax, right? So what we need is some way to contact those organizations, which might be simpler than trying to go to the.
That's actually the easiest path from what I found.
Yeah.
So, you know, vacation rentals by owner. I
Right,
mean, it's big operation, you know, and in the same things with other, it's the individual sometimes. So how do we combine, how do we get at this? Janet probably is us figuring a path. What does Park City do, you know?
They list their own enforcement, so they used to use a service, and now they've gone, they've actually hired.
They're a lot bigger than we are now.
Yeah, I'll look into it and get more details.
Yeah, but
I've had some experience with other jurisdictions with the short-term rental enforcement. And I think you have 2 issues. That one is what you're saying of people without business licenses and making sure that you're getting tax money. But the other is illegal ones, because you have very limited areas in which you're allowed to have short-term rentals in the town. And I do know that there's a company called Granicus that provides that service, where they do a search, not just with VRBO, but of all the online programs, and then they can tell you where they are. They can do all sorts of stuff. And there might be others now at this point. This was, you know, 5 years ago, they did an RFP and that was kind of the best one that they've used. But, you know, you are also talking about hiring an enforcement person for other enforcement items, so you could do that. And then we can confirm, or Jen can confirm with the tax commission, it's correct that the big operations do provide the taxes to, they should be reporting all the rentals to the tax commission. And so I guess it's a secondary question of, well, is the tax commission giving us our due?
I'm guessing there's a lot of gaps here right now,
Mm.
so, you know, let's find a process to, kind of determine how big the gap is, where that exists and how to control this going forward, just end this. So stand up and state your name, so to speak, it's the public input
Hey,
session.
Corinne, I just had a quick question. Do we have any idea what the gap may be? Like, would we have any idea? Cause you know, this costs money to go out and have enforcement. You obviously want to get a return that makes sense, given what the gap could be.
Well, at one point, I took a look and there were 20 some properties being offered. This was 6 months ago, I think.
Hmm.
And so there were, and that was just on, I think it was VRBO.
Yeah,
I didn't search any
Yeah.
other sites, so. That's our last data point. I think your point is well taken, before we spend much money on this.
What's the return on investment?
I think you could probably do some research and find a good, reasonable estimate and then like kind of guess at it and then.
One thing I
It's up to
found,
you guys,
JD, was, I always go for the, you know, where the biggest bang is for the buck, so to speak, so. My first analysis was like a year ago, and, there's a home here that was renting for 6,000 a day.
Hmm.
A day, so, you know, the percentage to us, you know, we're losing a lot just on. So you wanna find the big, the folks that are causing the biggest problem and where the biggest bucks are going, and end that real fast.
I think probably brought up a good point, though. There's two questions here. There's who's doing this that shouldn't be doing this. There are houses that are in zones that aren't supposed to be being rented, clearly, and then obviously the town needs to see from the collection is an important one too.
Well, I reported it to the master CPA, and, of course, now they have a new management system.
They got right on it, I'm sure.
But, you know, I mean, they're not, you know, they're not supposed to be doing that. They didn't really go deep into it, but I think it's, you know, it probably put the kibosh on them at some point. But I think we need to have some monitoring system, to the ROI point. We could, you know, I'd rather have a service that, as many as they identify, they take the portion off and we get our little piece, so to speak.
Sure.
And that way we never lose, you know, it becomes a subscription service, so to speak, but I don't know if Bob will look into that, Jan. So anyway,
I'd just like to see us close in on this issue. It's been ongoing for quite some time, and as JD pointed out, we have people who are probably doing it who aren't allowed to do it because they're not in an authorized area. Then we have people who are doing it lawfully, and then we have what I think is a larger group of people who are doing it unlawfully because they don't have a license and they're not paying the TRT.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I don't think we have.
I think that
really
does
good-
go to the heart of the matter, though. Like if you know VRBO or whoever is running the thing isn't kind of like doing their job. I mean, that seems like that's an issue.
We may need to just send them a letter explaining our ordinance and asking them pretty please to start collecting the tax. Otherwise, we may have to explore other options.
Yeah,
Perhaps a flaming arrow is the solution.
I got a feeling we're not the first town that probably presented that, you know, discussion with it.
But that's a source of revenue we're missing out on.
Well, we'll take that on and, let's make sure we keep this as an action item for, the staff, at least to get started. Anything else on that topic or anything else? Anyone else online who's raised their hand? I'm sure anyone online can jump in here.
I have a minor thing. Jumping on Jonathan's email about getting materials to the council more than 24 hours in advance, right? Like this, report we just got, which is fairly complicated, right? I spent about 2 hours this morning reading that and trying to understand it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll have some questions, but we have a rule, we're supposed to, present this material and whether it comes from our own people or from developers who are, obviously a problem as well, we need to start enforcing that rule, right? It's not a new rule, that doesn't require any,
Totally
just
agree.
requires some more discipline,
It's an
right?
ordinance, is it not?
It is.
60 hours
Yeah.
for the council.
So, I know we had some changes, we're not covering those items, but.
Okay.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I was gonna say this when we got to the agenda, which is next, but. We're not gonna cover Utopia, that has to get moved to, just wasn't in time. Besides, there's way too much in that kind of scenario. And so that was the one thing that dropped off. Anything like that,
Mhm.
it's not gonna get to the meeting because no one has time to look at that.
And by the way, we have the same rule for planning commission, we should.
Yeah.
Be just as disciplined with that, right? If the developer doesn't get stuff in time for staff to review, goes on to the next month, automatically.
And the other thing that we were talking about on this point is, part of this is, to me, as I'm looking at this in a historical sense. The town council has become much more involved in kind of editing, in adding comments, which is great. I mean, I think that's what we're here for. And we want town people to provide input as well. You need a better document control system that tracks what the document is. They call it document type, who's responsible, who made the edits, and it automatically tracks at this time these edits were made. And then, we should have, hey, 10 days before, we gotta come to some point where this document's gonna kind of make it or not into this meeting.
Yeah.
Not 60 hours, I think is not enough time.
No,
And so we need, in most towns, in governments and all, just about every corporation in the world now has some kind of document management system. We don't. And I think if we're gonna manage this process correctly, we're gonna have to think about how we do this. The cheapest ones are things like SharePoint in combination with Teams.
Yeah.
But I don't think that really is gonna work with us because that system is not actually a records management system. And to comply with the law, I think we need a properly purchased records management system. So that records expire when they should expire. That's what businesses do all the time, whether in finance or otherwise. So we'll look into that. I know it's gonna be an expense, but I don't think we can manage. This going forward.
for over 50 years, I've been using stuff like that, right? And, whether it be homegrown or whether it be purchased.
Well, I know, like Wasatch County, they use, Highlands, software, open, what is it, on base. And, I know plenty of governments and corporations, use, something called LiveLink, from Open Text. And so those are but I don't know, maybe we can find a smaller, a little bit less expensive system that would serve our purposes for the size of this town.
Well, with our email, we have a OneDrive account. Right? So if we could find something that uses a shared OneDrive, that's something to share documents, right? That might be a viable solution.
Well, we need
that
that.
integrates with what we
I
have.
mean, not to solve.
And I don't know, I don't know what the product would be.
We probably need to go through some RFP on this, so to speak,
Mhm.
like process.
Can I
Jump in.
Yes, thanks. So I think some of this, really, I think it could be very minimal cost because I'm wondering if we could just change some of our processes instead of maybe some of our programs, then maybe, I don't know, maybe kind of just start from square one, like just make a clear path to which documents are going on the next agenda. I have some thoughts, but maybe we can talk
Yeah, my problem with that now is because so many people are editing the doc. And that becomes a record within itself. We're both lawyers in the world of commerce. That agreement is between parties. So, that's why there's records of changes. And I don't think, I think what you're saying is, yes, we're gonna have to do the process, but we also need something that tracks who's making changes when. And then is that document being moved on to the next person that needs to check off, oh, I'm okay, or I have these 3 comments, and then does it circle back to
I
the
mean,
previous?
I'm guilty of that today. I sent you like 4 emails,
I
and
know.
after I read that report, then I'm like, oh crap, there's some other stuff I should have looked at. I
Totally.
apologize for
Me
that.
too, we're all, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
we're all, oh, there's a good idea, let's add that, and unless we're tracking this stuff, I don't know how, we can really keep a handle on getting that document ready for prime time on, the second Thursday of the month, so to speak.
I have a question for Polly. The drafts, are they grammable? And do we need to keep them, or is it just a final document that we
Just
need
the under grandma drafts are not considered record.
so it's only the final document we have to, okay, and that's easy.
And I think, obviously you have a great resource with Maria, it's part of the reporter's responsibilities to keep. Well, at least all contracts and agreements that are entered into.
And in the meantime, Maria, because we're not gonna have a fully fledged document system, whether it's inexpensive or expensive overnight. So we need, and I asked you and Jan to think through what is our processes in a spreadsheet to get us to the point where that document is ready for prime time, 10 days beforehand, and we're in agreement. And if it's not, it probably is gonna fall off the list of being part of the agenda. And and each document that goes into the agenda, who needs to do the checkoffs? And, it may vary by document, and I think that's gonna come down to us. Okay. Work to be done. Any other open comments here from anyone online? Well, I take that as a no, so we'll close any other input from him. So at that point, let's close public input, and move on to the agenda items. Just want to remind everyone, or at least share, that we will not be. So if you're thinking you're gonna wait around for item 11, which is at the end of the agenda, we're not covering Utopia, so anyone online who or otherwise is looking to cover that topic, we're gonna do that, carry it over to the March meeting. So with that, the first agenda item is and we covered this in the last meeting, but we just redo the vote. And that's the appointment consideration for advice and consent of 2 planning commissioners. And that's JD Cronin and Steve Powell, both of them are in the room. I would say, are there questions of our 2 potential commissioners here? On the planning, from the county?
Since JD wasn't here last time, and I'm not sure Steve was prepared, I would like to hear just a little bit from each of you. Very brief, your qualifications, but more importantly, what your personal motivation is for being on the planning commission.
JD Cronin, I think I have a fairly good handle on how the town operates. From my experience of being on the town council. I've seen some of the challenges that we've had in terms of the economic development group, in terms of the EDC work. So I think I have a holistic perspective on something like development that I think could be useful. I'm an empiricist. I believe in getting stuff done. I need people to kind of produce evidence. I want to see financials. I want to see stuff that, is oriented towards getting things done. So at the end of the day, because of my familiarity with the way the town does operate currently, the town council and others, I think I'd be a useful asset.
Steve?
Ditto.
Was a man of few words.
One is I've been asked to join the planning commission, and this is public service, and I take that seriously. And I live in this community and I want to see the best. I would say the other night at the meeting, I was very impressed with what I saw and heard, and the quality of the presentations was really excellent. But I am also aware of many of the liabilities that this town has, and I would like to see that fixed because I am a resident here. So those would be my motivations. As to my qualifications, I told you I have practiced medicine for over 30 years, but in that capacity, I have quite a bit of board and committee experience, and I'm also on a board in Park City. Now, I have been on the executive council of the New London County Medical Society, which is the oldest medical society in the United States. I've been on the hospital board in New York City and one in Norwich, Connecticut. I've been on their medical executive committees. I have been a respiratory therapy director, an ICU director, intensive care unit director, which requires a lot of a fair amount of time. I have been involved in the planning of several of my own offices, which were fairly large. I was the senior and managing partner of a 7-man pulmonary critical care group, and had quite a bit of experience managing the business. I also, in the planning and development of our latest office, was a very large project, quite a few thousand square feet. I've also been involved in the planning of a new intensive care unit in one of the hospitals. So I have some experience that will be translatable to this town and other things too.
Thank you.
Sure, be happy to go. So I'm very supportive of these two candidates. I know JD very well. He brings just a financial acumen to the planning commission that I think is needed. I'm excited to see the planning commission consist of 7 individuals. The diversity of thought that's on this team, I think, is deep. We are going to be hopefully dealing with a lot of commercial development activity in the upcoming years. And we're going to need JD's financial acumen there. I mean, his ability to be able to forecast and project and give some advice on what the economic impact of these transactions are for the town, I think will be just a huge value add. Not only that, he has years and years of experience at the negotiation table as a decision maker. And that brings a lot of weight with it, because it's one thing to, raise your hand and say, I agree. It's another thing to hash out the deal making terms. And so we need that skill set. Stephen, I'm so excited that you're willing to participate as well. The level of experience that you have sitting in the boardroom, it translates very easily. And I think that having your perspective for the planning commission adds to the diversity of thought that I'm thinking about. So I think these are 2 great candidates, and I thank you, because it's going to take a lot of your time. So I appreciate your interest.
Well, don't tell them that.
It is.
So
Great thinking, hold on here a second.
the thing I appreciate is
Lock that door, please.
both these candidates have well-honed analytical skills. And the skill to analyze a situation is translatable from one situation to another. But the objective analytical skills are the things that I find most attractive in these two individuals. They'll bring the ability to analyze things objectively as opposed to non-objectively. And I like that.
I would like to make a comment, which is, and this is in no way disparaging thoughts about the two candidates here, but I do have some concerns with the two people that they are replacing on the planning commission who had experience, background, training in planning. And I think that to be an effective planning commissioner, you need that background. And it has upset me that those two people were removed from the planning commission, because I thought they were very valuable members. They had very good input. And it's just a concern of mine, which is why in the previous meeting that we had, that I did not support these two candidates. I just feel strongly that we need some continuity on the planning commission.
My understanding
answer
is
that?
their terms expired, they weren't removed. Holly, were the two candidates?
Their terms expired, but I think that, council member Hazelton's point is that they didn't have, I mean, they could have been reappointed. But yes, there's no limit on how many terms you serve. Their terms were up, but.
The power of selection for the planning commission lies with the mayor. It's certainly, that choice is at his prerogative.
Yeah,
And our ability is, the legislative ability is to approve it, not to make a selection. That's what I understand.
That's
that right?
correct. It's
Yeah.
the mayor, it's chosen by the mayor with advice and consent of the council, so.
So Carol, I wonder if your two candidates would be interested in a different committee, because if they're willing to continue to serve, I think there's lots of needs in the town. I'm certainly recruiting right now for the economic development committee, so I'm a bit self-interested. But I think there's lots of ways they can continue to contribute.
If
Change is good, right? That's why
if they're willing to continue, which I have actually reached out to them.
Yeah.
I can reach out again, but
Yeah,
we'll see what.
let's find another capacity.
And I guess I'd like I sent the mayor a note after one of our residents had made some comments about this, and there was one part I thought was very cogent, and that was that they suggested that now that we have, 8 years ago was a different situation. We were trying to draft people to join the planning commission or the council or anything, right? We have a much bigger, and as you said, on Tuesday, a very diverse and very capable resident force, I'll call it, right, that's available. It would be nice if in the future we publish the fact that we need, so many planning commissioners, and have people apply with their qualifications so that you have a bigger pool to choose from, right, rather than trying to recruit people. And I think, I agree with the diversity, right? I think the diversity now is, it's actually pretty good, but, I don't know, every once in a while I find out somebody, like I didn't know Carol had been a sweeper for the curling team. I go, I learn stuff every day, right? Not that I think Hideout's gonna have a curling team anytime soon, but well, we never know. We have a hockey rink up here. So I would just encourage us to maybe broaden our scope a little bit for.
Well, one thing we
recruiting
did do, Brian, is we did broaden our
Yeah,
scope, so I brought this in.
the
There
working
were
groups, right?
1, 2, 3, 4. Doug Silver, as an example to this whole point, is he ran for council and he wants to get involved in some other committees. So, Alicia, who also was going to run for council,
Right.
she did, Scusin. She also, I talked to her about the Water Conservation Committee, working group. So here's my view on all of this. And that is, this country is built with cities, towns, counties, and state governments. And they move people all around after there's a change in administration. So that's one thing. Just look at what Park City did. Look at what Mayor Dickey did with, what's her name, Martha Miller. Jack Rubin, who had, what, 5 votes, he did not become, they did not put him on the council. Whether you agree, I have no play on this either way, but that's a real typical example. We only replaced 2 people whose terms were up. We didn't, going. Mayor Rubin ripped out the entire council, and the council said that was great. So they like that fact. So all I'm saying is, it's standard practice in the United States, in our government system, to move people around. It's standard practice in business. So this issue, to me, is more like, who's personal friends with the previous planning commissioner and who's not? I think it's time for, you have to have some element of change in every business. If you don't have movement of your personnel out, I mean, every good business I know has that in the process. And I want to see more people go through the planning commission, not where the same persons, just because they've been there for 10 years, they automatically get checked off and saying, I've got experience. There's all kinds of, in business, there's all types of experience. Not every piece of experience is relevant, and we need new blood in a methodical fashion, just like business does. So Carol, I don't agree with you. I think as much as I like Glynis and Joel's personal friend, it's time that we make change. And so you might be wrapped up in that, but I have to absolutely disagree with your approach.
Okay.
So, and it just so happens that I can at least offer 2 really great candidates. And the next time around in 2 years, we will have some new people coming in, because the town has so much fresh blood, and good people. That's why Tanya ran. That's why you ran. So think about it. You wouldn't be up here either.
No, I'm not arguing.
Okay, well, I'm just giving you.
I was just saying,
On how my thought process.
I would like to give you a bigger funnel on the input side.
If you were there Tuesday, you were.
Yeah.
The funnel was just starting, very good.
The hard part is getting people to join. There's a lot of talent in town. I would agree on that. Really superb people, but you gotta lean in and try to recruit them.
And the only way they're gonna start leaning in is by opportunities. If they see the opportunity just closed, why would I apply for that job? Think about it. It's like, oh, this business they're just closed off. It's gonna be the same old people. And so, no, I think we're following a good process. I agree. The bigger the pool, the better. Experience matters, but the type of experience also matters. And we need change over time. And that's what our government system's all about. So, anyway, do I have, at this point, do I take a vote?
You need to do 2 votes.
Two
Do
votes, okay.
one for each.
So, I would put JD up for Glynis's job, if we have to pick one versus another. Let's start with that. And so I'm gonna ask council for your opinion on JD to be part of the planning commission.
Yes.
I don't know, do we need a movement or? is it
Yeah,
just a vote?
you want to vote, so you want to do a motion then?
Yeah, we need a motion.
So do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So we got Tanya.
And you can do it by affirmation. You don't need to do a roll call vote, but.
Brian,
Do a roll-
Yes.
just a second. So affirmation, all in favor?
Aye.
I take that to the, is that opposed or an abstention, Carol?
I thought it was affirmation, right?
I didn't hear.
So you have to,
I
so
have to-
you would say, so an affirmation vote is just you ask who's in favor?
All in favor.
Who's against? And then abstentions. So,
All in favor?
Alright,
so you have,
Anyone against?
I'll abstain.
Who seconded that motion? I'm sorry.
right,
Right.
yeah, I second it.
And then we'll go to Steve Powell I think Joel's Piper. Okay, so is there a motion?
So moved.
Uh,
I'll second.
Brian seconds. And by affirmation, all in favor,
Alright,
all opposed.
I'll abstain.
Okay, so the motion carried from what I gather, right? Colin?
Yes.
Okay,
I just have a question. If they have actually, because their terms expired, why would we be pointing to fill a seat? Why wouldn't we just be appointing two new members since their seats have expired?
I think the idea is that each seat has so let's say that one of the votes didn't pass. Then the person whose seat was being filled stays on until filled. Right, so it makes it clear, just the line of appointment.
Okay. Rather than just appointing two new members.
Exactly.
Okay.
So these will both have terms of 4 years based on our code, so they will go to 2030.
so just a clarification point. The commission meets next week. I think is our first meeting.
Thursday.
That's this first meeting of the year, because we didn't have a
Right.
meeting in January.
So the first order of business for the planning commission is going to be for themselves to appoint or vote on a chair and vice chair.
Yeah, and I think if you don't know, the five who are still, so it's Chase, Winder, it's Brad Aramet, it's Rachel Cooper, it's Donna Turner, and
Capture.
and Catherine Walter, right?
Yeah.
So you'll join them, and then probably the first order of business will be electing the chair, because that's part of our new process. You elect your own chair. And you will have to take some training within, I think we moved it to the first 30
Yeah.
days. I think some of it can be online.
Yeah.
So
I think Thomas is leading there, right?
he's coordinating. I don't know if he's leading it. So if you have any issues on that, just talk to me and
Yeah.
we'll make sure, Steve.
Was that the program that was online? That,
There are several programs online.
That's different.
You also have tonight, you actually have, the council's gonna have land use training,
That's true.
so I would think that that would qualify as well for 45 minutes of legal requirement.
Do we have to swear them in?
Maria swears them in, and you can either do it this evening, or you can do it before the planning commission.
I think we had talked about the planning commission, but it's up to you.
Well, would it count if one of them wanted to stay around, or both of them, for the 45 minutes? They could knock off their training requirement, is that what
Piece of
you're?
it, yeah.
Yeah,
Piece of
piece of it, 2 hours, right, I think you need.
Yeah, I have to look at what the that seems about right.
Training require, isn't it 4 hours? But I don't know if that was our city, our size city is.
Well, I would say, you know what, I would say swear them in, I mean, does that make sense?
Whatever you guys want, yeah.
You're here, so.
Yeah.
And. Marie,
That works for me. We can
Yeah.
do that. And I'll get you to sign some paperwork
get it over with.
after this.
All we can do is swear out, we can't swear.
Okay, yes, if you'd like to come up here, just one at a time, then great.
All right, thanks.
All right, and just raise your right hand. All right, and repeat after me. I, and state your name,
I, JD Cronin Jr.,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thanks, everyone. Congratulations. Thank you.
This is so exciting. Okay, all right.
Been a while.
Thank you. Just raise your right hand. All right, and repeat after me. I, and state your name,
I, Stephen Powell,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Well, congratulations and condolences.
Yeah, really.
Exactly.
You've got a lot of work.
Now we can tell them the truth. Okay, I think we're moved beyond that, and, the next one is that we also have to revote on the pro tem, right?
Yes.
So, this was, Chris Beyer had been the pro tem, and, since she's no longer part of the council, I am, requesting or, asking that Jonathan Bell be appointed mayor pro tem in my absence, so,
Yeah,
you know,
so as we talked about last time, it's technically the council who chooses.
Oh.
It's not, this is not a mayor appoint with
Okay.
council consent. This is council, you get to pick who your pro tem is. But, so by all means, you guys should, pick someone and vote.
Are there any other volunteers?
Yeah.
He's already passed on it. so-
I'm stepping back. There's no more room. Yeah, I nominate Jonathan to be pro temp.
And I'll second.
Okay, now just do you wanna just,
What vote?
you vote, so you can just do it.
I don't vote, do I?
You don't vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anyone against, and any abstentions? Did you vote, Jonathan?
I did.
Okay, you can vote, you're allowed to vote. I just want to,
Last time-
Maria needs to know that everyone vote, you gotta account for
You
everyone.
could do that with the interim mayor, you know, Chris and I weren't allowed to vote.
Well, that's different.
What's different?
The state code says that you don't get to vote
Okay,
for that, so that's,
okay, so we good?
you're good. So now you can move on to your
Well,
next.
if you said nay, then we'd have a problem.
I just volunteer.
So we actually get to do some training here. That's the next step is Jordan here?
And let me just make, I've known Jordan for a long time. He's the head of the state ombudsman's office, so you're very lucky to have him be here to present for you. He's a wealth of knowledge and a lot of experience, so.
You guys hear me?
Oh, yay. Yes.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
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 Okay, very good. Thank you, Polly, for the introduction. Should I just jump on in?
Yeah.
Okay, and do I have the ability to share my screen?
You do, you will. Bear with me.
Okay. So I'll first apologize for not being there with you guys. I had understood that this was going to be a fully remote meeting. Usually we like to be there in person for trainings. I know we'll be there next Thursday with the Planning Commission when we do that training, but I apologize I'm not there with you guys tonight. But we'll still have a good time, even though I'm in the computer. So let's see.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is this the same training that you would do next Thursday?
Well, so, okay, here's the deal, right? Rob is our training director, and he was the one who had scheduled both of these. He had a conflict tonight, and he had asked me to tag along. He was going to do kind of the primary presentation, and I was just going to be the color commentary for this one. And so I imagine that next week's, so I don't want to speak for Rob because he's in charge of next week's training, but I imagine there will be a lot of similar things that we'll go over. I'll talk about it, kind of addressing you as the city council and what your role is in land use decision making, but I'll also be addressing what the role of the planning commission is and any other members, right, of your staff as it relates to that kind of stuff. But Rob has his own style, so he'll give his own flavor to it as well. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, and I mean, I just didn't want to know, will they, if our two planning commissioners stay for this, will they get counted for the time that they also have training next Thursday?
So this is a local law, this is our law that requires the training. We're not required by state code because we're too small.
That's right.
And so I did pull up what it says, and I think it's a little bit of your interpretation. I would think that they would get credit for both 45 minutes because it's both land use training, it's different aspects or different presenters. And frankly, I mean, I know land use law, but I learn something every time, so it's always beneficial.
Thanks, Carter. We get credit for both.
That's fine.
Hey,
Go.
sounds like a good answer. Awesome. Okay, well, jumping in, and everyone can see my screen and hear me now.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I will say I do like this to be interactive. I understand that what you guys are dealing with there in Hideout is different than, what the town that I live in, Riverton, is dealing with, and it's different than what St. George is dealing with. So please speak up, interrupt me, jump in if you have any questions or discussion items. And I hope we can have a good conversation. I only have probably about 15 minutes or so of presenting, and then I anticipate whatever other time you want to use will be kind of question and answer, and we can talk about the things that are interesting to you guys. But I do like to kind of present initially what our office is and what the role of our office is. So an ombudsman is, if you're familiar with the term, most people aren't, is a government appointed individual who helps to kind of resolve disputes between citizens and the government. And our office has been around since 1997. Initially, we really only handled eminent domain disputes. So when the government needs private property for a public use, we could step in, provide information, provide dispute resolution, also an additional appraisal, things like that. That's here on the next page. So that's one of our main roles that we provide. And then in 2006, we were given this additional role of providing advisory opinions. So if there's a dispute over how a code should be interpreted or an agreement or some aspect of a land use application, then we can provide an advisory opinion to give kind of an independent look at the issue and help to hopefully resolve the dispute in that way. Another role we have is we provide education. So we spend a lot of time on the phone with people, both property owners and local officials, just answering questions. We have our website, propertyrights.utah.gov, and then we go around and we provide these trainings as well. And then we also have a fund that we issue grants from for training throughout the state. Here is our education website, LUAU, which stands for Land Use Academy of Utah.utah.gov. So you can go check out that. There's a lot of great resources on there to help you understand how to make good and legal decisions, as well as following different best practices. Okay, so getting into some planning basics. So the state law governing how we plan and how we zone in Utah is the Land Use Development and Management Act. This outlines some of the purposes, so you can see they're pretty broad, right? Providing for health, safety, and welfare, promoting prosperity. And you can just kind of go down the list and see that there's a lot of aspects and purposes of land use. And it's important to recognize that I'll say as the property rights ombudsman that we're constantly, or it's important for local officials that they understand that they're balancing that with property rights and an individual's right to use their land in a way that doesn't influence or impact others, right? Zoning sits on top of that general rule, but it's very important that local officials kind of strike the right balance and respect and protect property rights while at the same time pursuing the public interest and providing for health, safety, and welfare. Hopefully, most of the time the two can align, right? But to the extent that they do conflict, you have to keep those things in mind and consider best practices as you're making those decisions. Kind of the basis and the foundation of any good planning regime, doing land use planning in any community is the general plan. It's a mandated document. State law requires that if you want to plan, you have to have a general plan. And it guides the growth of your community. It sets your vision. You should, reconsider it on a regular basis. And it's intended to be a kind of this living document that guides your community and helps you understand what you want in your community as far as land uses, transportation. Recently, the state requires now that you also have a moderate income housing plan, as well as for larger communities, you also must have a water plan, right? So again, the general plan is there to be taken seriously, right? And to set the vision for your community. And then you have your land use ordinances. So these are your zoning ordinances, your planning ordinance, your development and subdivision ordinances. These are intended to implement your general plan, and these are the actual rules that govern development in your community as your land use ordinances. We'll talk about this a little more in a minute, but it's important to recognize that when you're writing your land use ordinances, any ambiguity. So if you can look at a law or an ordinance and two different people can draw different conclusions, then you always interpret in favor of the property owner's desired use, the applicant's desired use. So if you want something to say something, then you need to make sure that it says it specifically, right? And then best practice is your ordinance should implement your general plan. So that's another thing to just keep in mind as you're moving forward is, do your ordinance reflect the goals and the vision of your community as articulated through your general plan? Any questions at this point, comments or thoughts? Okay. Zoning, so we put up there kind of what the Hideout town currently has with their zoning. Local regulations, they manage the look and feel of your community. They control things such as land use density, physical dimensions. And then again, they're intended to avoid conflicts between land uses and protect the community and provide for compatibility. Some considerations to keep in mind, designations of your land use density and physical dimensions have economic impacts, right? And also impacts on property rights. So consider that as you're making those kinds of decisions. And it's important that we focus on consistency, transparency, fairness, different things like that, and weigh all those things as you're enacting and amending your zoning ordinances. So now getting kind of into roles and responsibilities of the decision makers that are involved in land use decision making. This is a graphic that I pulled from a book called The Ground Rules. So Craig Call, he was the first ombudsman in the state, and he wrote a book on land use. Hopefully, I know we've provided grants to ensure that all local officials can have a copy of this book. If you guys don't, let us know and we can make sure you do get one. But this is, I think this is a really good kind of representation of the different players involved and kind of the interactions and maybe even the pull and tug that you see among the different players. So obviously you have your elected and appointed officials, city council members, planning commissioners, your appeal authority. You have your staff, your professional planners, zoning administrator, your city manager, your city attorney. Those are all staff that help to make decisions. And then you have applicants and property owners. Those are your developers and business owners, homeowners. And then you have neighbors who are often also homeowners and business owners, but their interests are different as it relates to any given specific application that isn't their own, right? So as far as the town council, they are the ones who set the rules and make the policy, right? They're the decision-making body for the local agency. They make laws of general applicability based on weighing of broad and competing policy considerations. Like I mentioned earlier, that often involves the balancing of several competing interests. And it's important that as elected officials, you take into account all of those interests in your decision making, which we'll talk about here in more detail in a minute. And then as it relates to planning, the role of the planning commission, very often the planning commission gets involved in the nitty-gritty of the administrative decision making, but by state statute, the planning commission's primary role is it's a technical advisory commission to the city council. So the city council, they're looking at kind of people's preferences, opinions. What do we want our community to look like? The planning commission should take a more maybe disinterested role in some ways, right? And provide kind of a perspective of, hey, what utilities do we have available? What services are available? From a technical standpoint, what makes the most sense where, right? So the planning commission plays a pivotal role in helping the city council to understand what factors to consider, right? What considerations to keep in mind when they're making legislative land use decisions, when deciding what your general plan is going to look like, what your local ordinance is going to look like, and things like that. And then every city or town, in this case, needs to also appoint a land use authority. So a land use authority is someone who makes administrative decisions, which we'll talk about again here in a minute. It can be an individual, a staff member. It can be a board, like a planning commission, and it can even, and if none of those things are appointed, or it can be designated also as your city council, except now, just recently in state law, it was included that for single family, two family, and townhome subdivisions, the city council cannot be the land use authority in those cases. But in other decision making, the legislative body may be appointed as the land use authority, but they don't have to be. In best practice on typically is to have either an individual or a commission look at administrative decisions with the land use authority.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jordan?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the planning commission.
Yeah, you
That's
said,
correct.
I was just gonna
We
make
have
that
to
point.
be-
Our ordinance says it's the plan.
So is the planning commission your land use authority for most administrative decisions in Hideout?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Very good. And that is, typical, especially with smaller towns, you'll see that a lot. Okay, so now how do we make good decisions? This concept of legislative decision making versus administrative decision making is, I think, kind of a foundational concept that individuals who are involved in land use decision making need to understand and should understand, because depending on what type of a decision you make, the discretion you have and the deference that courts give the decision maker are significantly different. And so to ensure that you make good and legal decisions, you want to understand the contours and the rules that apply, right? So first, talking about legislative decision making. Legislative decisions, like I said earlier, making laws of general applicability based on the weighing of broad competing policy considerations. So we're talking about your general plan, your land use ordinances, your development standards, your zone map, and any zone changes, decisions whether or not to annex land, right, into your boundaries. That's a legislative decision. And then you'll see there may be development agreements. So development agreements can look different depending on what they're doing, right? If the short of it is, if a development agreement is making new rules, if it's legislating, then it's a legislative decision and it has to be approved by your town council, right? And your standard of review is whatever decision you make, right? Whether or not to approve an annexation, whether or not to amend an ordinance. Number one, that decision has to be consistent with any applicable state or federal law, right? So it can't be illegal. And then otherwise, it just has to be reasonably debatable that the decision could advance the general welfare or the public interest. So in other words, the courts give a lot of deference to the legislative body as far as the decisions they make when they're legislating, when they're making legislative decisions. Considerations, again, you can't violate law. It has to be reasonably debatable. And then you're attempting to strike an appropriate balance between the public interest and private property rights where the two may conflict. The question that often comes up is what is the role of the public in legislative decisions? So the role of the public is to provide their input, their opinions, their preferences, and then it's really up to the legislative body and the decision makers to decide how much weight to give any individual opinion, right? About what the ordinance should look like, whether or not to enact a new rule, different things like that. And then you can also obviously receive input from the public for facts and evidence to support your conclusions. So what does this look like? We have kind of a little case study here. This is a seminal Utah Supreme Court case that helped to kind of define the contours of legislative discretion in Utah. This involved a Harmon's grocery store. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Draper City. Maybe you've seen Harmon's there. So in this case, Harmon's made application to construct a store there in Draper. Their general plan, the city's general plan, identified it as commercial. The current zoning, however, was residential. So Harmon's needed to come in and request a zone change, which they did. Staff recommended approval. They said, yeah, there's good access here. The general plan shows it as commercial. They have all the utilities they need. It looks like the right place for a Harmon's. But there were some residents nearby that didn't like the idea. So they came to the city council meeting and opposed the zone change. The developer's application included all these things, right? There was traffic studies, management plans, landscaping. They had all their ducks in a row, everything they needed to show that, yeah, this is a good idea here, right? The neighbors didn't like it, and so the city council decided to side with the neighbors, and they denied the application. Harmon sued in district court. They lost there. It went to the Utah Court of Appeals. And what do you think they said? Any guesses? Did the Court of Appeals uphold the decision to deny the zone change, or did they overturn it? Any guesses?
You moved that slide so fast, I couldn't see it. What for the overturn?
Denied.
So they actually upheld the legislative decision, right? Here's kind of what they said. Here are some of the things they said, and bear with me. I know there's a lot of text here, but it says Harmon's presented ample information to the city council that would have justified the request to the change in zoning classification. In attacking the city's actions, Harmon's burden was not to show that the city council had no reason to deny the application. Rather, the burden was on Harmon's to show that the city's decision to preserve the status quo could not promote the general welfare. Although Harmon's presented evidence to support the position that the proposed rezone was reasonable, City Council, upon the record before it, could have reasonably concluded that use of the property for residential purposes consistent with the current zoning status was entirely appropriate. So again, you just see there, right? The courts in legislative decision making say, hey, look, this isn't a legal issue. This is a policy issue for you to decide, right? And I'll just read that. It's their prerogative to determine public policy. The last paragraph there, in performing their duty, it is both their privilege and obligation to take into consideration their own knowledge of such matters and also to gather available pertinent information from all possible sources and give consideration to it in making their determination. People who live in Draper City or the surroundings always get confused by this because they say, well, hey, there's a Harmon's there now, though. So what happened was after this, the Harmons realized, okay, we need to be more persuasive. We need to be more convincing. And so they brought back a plan that reoriented the store, kind of drew it away from the residences. And as Craig Call would say, he presents this case really well when he does presentations, and said that they proposed a landscaping plan and an area of landscaping that would have been considered a national park in Wyoming. So they came back and they said, hey, how can we get this into a place that you can be comfortable with? And they did that. And the city council at that point said, okay, we think it's in the public interest to approve this, right? But it was at their discretion. So Okay, so now moving to administrative decision making, the pendulum starts to swing the other way. And again, this is another graphic from that ground rules book. You can see there it goes from more discretion to less discretion as you get into administrative decision making. What are we talking about with administrative decisions? We're applying existing codes to a particular development proposal based on individual facts and circumstances. So now we're talking about subdivision applications, CUPs, commercial site plans, building permits, variances, and then if you just have development agreements that are implementing existing regulations and maybe just setting timelines or articulating roles and responsibilities of the parties, who's going to be responsible for what, those can be considered administrative, right? Because they're not making any new rules. Now the legal standard of review includes that, okay, yeah, you can't make a decision that's illegal, right? So it has to be consistent with state and federal law in addition to any local ordinances or vested rights that are in place. But regarding any factual determinations, now you have to support your decision with evidence, right? No longer is it sufficient that it's just reasonably debatable that a decision is in the public interest. You actually have to support a decision with evidence. So you're applying the plain language of your land use regulations, and kind of like I alluded to earlier, if it doesn't plainly restrict the application, or you could reasonably read it to support different interpretations, the land use authority must interpret and apply the rules to favor the proposed land use application. So again, ambiguity in your regulations favors the property owner, not the city or the town. And then where you have to draw inferences or make conclusions on facts, you have to support your decision with substantial evidence. It's evidence that a reasonable mind would accept as adequate to support a conclusion. We're talking about, credible, relevant, independent, expert evidence. So traffic studies or other types of studies and things that are based in fact, as opposed to just in opinion or preference. The role of the public also changes significantly, right? So let's say that someone's proposing a subdivision or they're seeking a conditional use permit, and someone comes in and says, you know what, I really don't think this is the right place for it, right? At that point, public opinion and preference may not be considered by the decision maker, by the land use authority who's making the decision. At that point, the courts refer to public input as public clamor, and it can't be considered. Was there a question there?
No, we're just laughing.
No,
Oh,
not
sorry,
even
my bad.
had much experience in this.
Okay. Yeah, it's harder to read the room when I'm not there, so I apologize. But what the public can do, however, right, is they can receive input regarding facts and evidence to support its conclusion. The example I like to give, which may not be incredibly relevant to you guys there in Hideout, is maybe someone brings in a subdivision application, and Farmer Brown comes in and says, "Hey, are you guys aware that I have a historic irrigation ditch here, a prescriptive easement?" And maybe the city or the town isn't aware of that, right? But that kind of stuff should be considered and accounted for when they're making decisions in that regard. And so that's a fact, right? That's evidence of something that should be considered in a land use application. But as far as opinions and preferences, those things are off the table at the administrative decision-making stage. Okay, so what does this look like? What does administrative discretion look like? Here, the case study we have is Wadsworth versus West Jordan City. The Wadsworth, it's a construction company. They had this is an actual picture of their yard. They requested a conditional use permit to allow outdoor storage. The land was already zoned to allow the use that they were proposing, so they didn't need a legislative decision, right? They were just making it was just an administrative decision. Since the use was designated as a conditional use, the law only allowed the planning commission to impose reasonable conditions governing the manner in which materials could be stored outdoors. And they could only deny the application if it could be shown by evidence, right, in the record, that the negative aspects of outdoor storage could not be mitigated through reasonably imposed conditions. So there's a public meeting, and neighbors, they kind of took the approach that you see in a legislative context, right? They expressed concerns about rodent traffic, dust problems. It didn't look good, right? And so the planning commission denied the application. Wadsworth appealed that to the city council and it was also denied. So here were the findings that the council made for their denial. There just so happened to be a new facility, a Dannon facility across the street. It was kind of an economic driver that everyone was excited about in the community at the time. And they wanted to keep Dannon happy, right? They wanted the place to look good. And they said that outdoor storage was detrimental to the area, making it less attractive. And they concluded that outdoor storage may be considered a nuisance. It would encompass the majority of the parcel. The intensity of outdoor storage is much different than the neighboring owners, and they determined it was detrimental to existing and future businesses in the area and not harmonious with the goals of the city. So, as you can see, that a lot of that is a kind of an expression of an opinion or a preference, as opposed to any sort of concrete evidence saying, "Hey, this is why the application doesn't comply with the requirements of the code," right? And so this is what the court said on appeal. In denying Wadsworth application, the city council relied on its findings that the city had made significant investment in Dannon. Outdoor storage is detrimental and injurious to the goals of the city. However, the only evidence in the record supporting this finding are the concerns expressed by neighboring landowners. Similarly, the sole evidence supporting the decision that appellant's outdoor storage may be considered a nuisance are the concerns raised by the neighbors and the neighboring property owners regarding potential increase in rodent traffic and dust. So again, the only evidence they had provided were opinions, preferences, as opposed to anything based in fact or studies or different things like that. And so in that case, the court said, yeah, sorry, West Jordan, you have to approve that permit. So again, and this is just to kind of emphasize that when you're making a administrative decision, you follow the plain language of the ordinance, and then you have to show your work. You have to show the basis of your decision through substantial evidence. You have to disclose the steps by which you reach your conclusions, and then you have to make findings of facts and conclusions of law that are adequately detailed. Failure to do so renders a decision arbitrary and capricious, which is grounds for overturning it. Okay, so that is kind of the meat of the presentation I had for you guys. And I don't know, did I take up all the time with doing that? This is kind of something we kind of put up at the end to say, hey, here are other common legal issues in land use that we see. If you see anything there you want to talk about, let me know, or if you have any other questions about anything else. But that's as much I had as far as a prepared presentation. So.
Any questions there? I'll make a comment, George.
Yeah.
I know when I was on the planning commission about 6 or 7 years ago now, I went to the office of the ombuds team, and can't remember who I talked to at that point in time, but I wanted to get a better understanding of annexation in Utah and how we would apply that to our annexation policy. And I just felt I just can't remember who I talked to, but I must have spent about an hour and a half. And whoever I talked to was like, great. It was like, I didn't know much about the annexation policies in Utah. I had done planning work in New Jersey, so I was on a previous planning commission, but things are so different here, state to states, different. Right. All I can say is compliment you guys for what you're doing and the education that you bring, because it helped me a lot in understanding how to kind of craft our policy. So we didn't. I don't
Well,
think
since you had such a great experience, I have to think it must have been me you would have talked to. But no, I'm glad you had that experience.
I can see I don't think it was you, that's for sure.
No, and now there's 2 other attorneys in the office, Marcy Jones and Rick Plen. And yeah, if you call in, we try to, if not be available immediately when you call, at least get back with you in the next 24 to 48 hours to be helpful and answer any questions. So I'm glad you had a good experience with that. Sorry, I think I cut someone off.
Jordan, I'll ask you a question just because I know maybe I'm the only one that's super interested in this, but plat subdivision, the law changed 2 years ago. So now our planning commissions are hearing subdivisions, no longer goes to, the council. And
Right.
we have, final authority is our town planner.
Okay.
And I'm just curious, how you feel like that's working, and also if you had any comments in terms of having plat amendments go to that same process, or if you think that the council should have more of a say if it's not vacating any roads or anything like that.
That's a really good question, Polly. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, the process was changed. It kind of created this back and forth review cycle scenario. We're getting, to be candid, excuse me. I mean, we get kind of mixed reviews on the new process, right? If you have the resources to support it, most communities, who have the resources say, oh yeah, we were kind of already doing this. This is normal. We understand this. I think where it really has hit harder is the smaller communities, right? That don't have the resources. And so there may be tweaks in the future, right? That kind of address and consider, and it does allow a longer period of time for review. I think it's 40 days as opposed to 20 days in each cycle, right? For smaller communities. But that's the feedback we hear the most from smaller communities is, hey, this can be tough. But I think people are starting to get used to it. And the idea is that it's supposed to be useful for both sides, right? So it kind of requires cities and towns to follow a little more defined timelines, but it also requires developers to make sure they're bringing all the pertinent information and they're not, absent for weeks on end, and the town is wondering where the application is at and things like that is the intent, right? Um, so as to your question, as far as plat amendments, I think the intent is that an amendment would follow the same process as an initial subdivision, right? Um, and as far as the decision making is concerned, I personally think that's appropriate to treat it the same way. But I know there's different opinions out there. So,
I have a question. How do you advise planning commissioners with respect to the scope of their review? And so what I mean is,
mhm.
when commissioners are looking at proposed developments, there's so much detail that they start looking at.
Mhm.
And at what point is that detail potentially outside of really their scope of what they should be looking at?
Mhm.
Like
Good
how do you
question.
guide them on what's an overreach on where they may have an opinion versus what they should really focus on? Because you
And are
can
we
get
talking
lost in the weeds, right?
for sure? And we're talking about an administrative application, or is this for like a zone change or something?
It could be either scenario. I just,
Okay.
I mean, so for example, if a developer comes in and proposes, I want to do A, B, and C, and they're laying out as much as they can to be convincing to you, right?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
there certain details that really the commissioners shouldn't be weighing in on because they should be looking at the code? Like how do you guide people in
Yeah.
that respect?
Yeah, so if it's legislative in nature, if they're saying, hey, if the developer is coming in and asking for a new zone or like a master planned area or a planned development, right? There are good arguments to make that kind of getting more into the weeds makes sense. At the same time, right? With legislative decision making, you can definitely go too far and you can make the process overly burdensome for an applicant, right? On the administrative side, I think it becomes a lot more clear in that you can require the developer to do what's in the code, right? And if you're getting more detailed than that or more prescriptive than what's in the code, then I think you're starting to get into trouble, right? You're starting to get into places where you may be exposing yourself to issues and exercising an authority to an extent that you don't have authority to do so, right? And so that's kind of where I will guide people is to say, hey, what does the code require, right? And things that are either unaddressed by the code or things that the code doesn't require, That's where the applicant has a lot more discretion to kind of decide what they want the development to look like, frankly. So, is that responsive to the question?
I think it is. I mean, I think that's helpful guidance, um, especially for newer commissioners, right? To understand kind of where does the scope of my review really need to end?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it starts and end with, especially with administrative decision making, it starts and end with what your code requires, really. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I have a question about public input.
Yeah.
If I understood your slide correctly, public input, when people are discussing their preferences for aesthetics and otherwise, is irrelevant to the conversation. Is that correct?
In the administrative context, yes. Yep, it is. So if you're just looking at an application for a building permit or a subdivision or a conditional use permit or a site plan, again, to the previous question, it starts and ends with the code, right? Um, uh, yeah. And again, I will make the caveat that I know with Hideout, right? You guys have a master development agreement, as I understand it, right? And I'll admit I don't know all the details of that, but development agreements can get a lot more specific about things, right? And so definitely take that into consideration, and I'll defer to Polly and Jan and those in the room on what that looks like, right? But really, yes, it starts and ends with the code or whatever rules that do apply to the specific development, right?
Those with vested rights have those rights, right?
Correct.
That's also a significant point here, correct?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. So the idea behind vested rights is, whether it's through a development agreement or if someone submitted a complete application and paid all their fees, that locks in the rules that apply, right?
Thank
And
you.
yep, yep.
Very helpful.
Any other
George,
questions?
I have a question for you, yeah. I've been spending a fair amount of time listening to legislative action at the state
Mm,
level. And one of the bills, I can't, don't count on me, normally I'm good at numbers, but it's the bill that's allowing essentially the state and governor to well, so to speak, exact their conditions and basically kind of not overrule, but they would be the decision-making authority on a lot of land use. How do can you share any comments on that one?
Oh, man, that's above my pay grade, Mayor. So yeah, I mean, preempt is the word we use, right? So where local governments are creatures of the state, right? The state kind of determines what authority local governments have to make decisions on land use and development. It ultimately lies with the state, that decision-making authority. And so, the floors and the ceilings that they've set are articulated in the Land Use Development and Management Act, right? And historically, they've delegated a lot of that authority to those local governments to make those decisions. But more and more as housing and development becomes from the legislature's perspective, I won't share my personal opinion, right? But from their perspective, it's more and more becoming a statewide concern, as they would say, right? Then they start clawing back some of that authority. So, there was that some examples, right? Like internal accessory dwelling units that used to be wholly at the discretion of each local community whether or not to allow those. A couple years ago, the state said, "Now we need those in more places, right? We need more internal accessory dwelling units." I know there is a proposal right now, a bill proposing now to allow external accessory dwelling units by right in certain cases. And then, yeah, I don't know that it's been resurrected yet, but there was a proposal last year to create the Beehive Development Commission Authority. Maybe that's the one you're referring to, where they would have throughout the state kind of been the land use authority on certain projects of what they consider to be statewide concern, right? And so there's this regular back and forth between local governments and the legislature about who should have what authority. I think most people you talk to will agree that the closer the decision makers are to the people, the better, right? But yeah, there's definitely an array of opinions on that as well. I don't know if I successfully punted on the question or not there, but
Yeah, I'd love to at some point get some further views. Is it House Bill 184, Jan, do you remember?
I don't remember which one. I think you're talking about 284.
Is it 284?
Mhm.
Okay, so sorry for deflecting that, but it's hugely important to the authority of towns in managing their future as opposed to the state essentially becoming the land use authority.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Governor Cox is obviously is for it as a good chunk of the legislature who are, many of them are developers. So there's some benefits, I guess, from acceleration, but it would take control from the towns away in terms of what we could vote for and what we couldn't, so to speak, and we'd almost be preempted, so to speak. So anyway,
Yeah.
was
The perspective is well taken for sure. So,
okay.
well, anything else, or is everyone ready to move on to the next item? I know you guys have some more things to get to. So,
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate your insights. It was a great summary and
yeah, absolutely. And I can send these slides along if you guys want to look at them. I'll put up this last one. So there's my contact, my email address and phone number, contact information, our website. Um, Encourage you to reach out if you have any additional questions that you want to talk about offline. So thanks for
thank
having me,
you.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And Maria, do we have any more of those books?
Land use.
Yeah, for,
I'll get another print.
Oh, good.
okay.
I saw two
For
upstairs.
For
That's it.
JD and Steve, so, there's the Bible and there's also like the shorter version, which, had, it looked like some of the slides that, took.
That's great. Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
Take care,
so
guys. Thank you.
Thanks again,
Thanks,
George.
Jordan.
Next up on the list is the utility rate study, and do we have Fred Philpott on board? And
We do.
we do. Good. Fred, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for letting me join this evening virtually. Great to be with you. Yes, we've been working with the town as we've evaluated the utility system. And we've provided a memorandum. I think that's been distributed to the town council for review. Essentially, what we're looking at in that memo is an evaluation of the standby water, sewer, and storm utility cost allocation and revenue comparison, and then looking at potential impacts to rates from a big picture perspective. Again, one of our primary objectives is to ensure that we're allocating costs to each enterprise fund or to each service appropriately, and then measuring that against revenue generation and potential rate change. The challenge here is the town does not have separate enterprise funds. This is all part of a single utility fund. So all of it goes into one big bucket, the revenues, and then all of the expenses are housed in that same bucket, essentially. So we went through an exercise working with staff to look at the allocation of those utility costs, and the memo was a result of that. I'm going to share my screen here if it allows me to. So here's the memo I'll walk through. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So what we looked at is when evaluating standby rates, we're allocating fixed O&M costs like labor, maintenance, billing, any debt service expense, capital related, or reservation expense if there's water rights or direct costs for water access. We want to try to limit or remove costs that are related to usage. And that can be a little challenging looking at your specific line items, but we're looking at trying to pull some of that out and not apply that to standby. I want to make sure the methodologies that we utilize are understandable and based on a reasonable allocation strategy. And then once we've allocated those costs, our objective is to ensure that we're measuring the cost to revenue and applying solutions to those specific services directly rather than trying to mitigate any shortfalls by raising non-applicable fees. So in order to do that, we initially LRB worked with staff to allocate costs. And then we reevaluated that and came up with methodologies that we thought were appropriate for each expense and revenue line item. And those methodologies are listed here. We have a direct allocation, which is the revenue or cost is directly attributed to a specific utility fund. Another methodology is based on rate proportionality. We actually try to pull that one out because that one's a circular equation, meaning that if you raise rates, then it causes the percentage to go up and causes more cost to be allocated, which causes the need for a rate increase. So it's somewhat circular. Then we have the CO versus standby. This is where revenues and expenses are split between standby and then a proportional allocation of the utility funds. And those percentages are based on total platted lots versus those with certificate of occupancy, or those that do not have that. Then we also have an acre feet utilized versus available. This is looking at, again, standby versus the allocation of the other utility funds and how much of the 150 acre feet of water purchased from Jordanelle is utilized by the demand variable. And then we have what we call a proportional allocation. And this is where we're taking several factors and looking at trying to mix those and bring them in to the analysis based on a proportional distribution that considers a fixed component, a usage component, and a system distribution, meaning how much of the system infrastructure is dedicated to water, sewer, or storm. And then we allocate those variables to look at essentially a weighted percentage distribution. And here you can see those percentages for standby. It's a little over 10% under the proportional allocation. For water, it's 71% because that's the measurable usage variable that's kind of influencing that proportion. On the storm side, it's 7.9%, and the sewer, it's 10.9%. So under the proportional allocation, a lot of the cost is distributed to the water system based on the fact that there's a high use there, as well as a fixed portion and a system portion. So there's a 28% of the system allocated to the water side when you look at the ratio of that element. So that's the proportional distribution. Then we also have an asset distribution that's looking at the assets within each system, so water, sewer, and storm, and what is the proportion of that. And then we have a system distribution that goes back up to this table, which is again allocating a percentage of the system, not just to the three utilities, water, storm, and sewer, but we're also allocating to standby since there's a reservation component there where they're benefiting from the system and therefore need to pay for a percentage of that system. Alrighty, so once we had the methodologies, then what we did is looked at again all of the line items as it relates to revenue or income, operating income, and expense. The majority of revenue is allocated based on a direct distribution, so it's standby revenues. It goes in the standby bucket and down through the utilities. There were some that we allocated proportionally, like interest or other operating income, but the majority is a direct allocation. For expenses, again, we tried to look at fixed versus variable expenses. So benefits, salaries, leases, administration were all proportional. Meters were directly to water. Consulting services were proportionate. Our materials and supplies were distributed based on the percentage of the system or the asset distribution. Our repairs and maintenance were the CO versus standby allocation because there's a system component as well as a distribution between standby versus non-standby. So we felt that was most appropriate there. For engineering expense, that was proportionate. Our sewer charge is a direct expense to the sewer fund. Water, direct to water. Our water reservation is direct to standby. And then our legal and accounting, we allocated proportionally. Bad debt expense, which I don't think there was any here. That was a zeroed out item. Same with the interest expense, and then depreciation is based on the system component. So again, under the system component, it's proportionally allocated to standby and the 3 utilities, but it's not weighted based on those other variables of fixed and usage. It's just a system allocation. So that's how we looked at each of the expense line items to essentially push the cost into each bucket for this analysis. Once we have that, then we looked at some other policy decisions relative to funding of depreciation and make sure we have that. Typically in these studies, we may remove depreciation and shift to a true cash basis approach where we're funding future capital cost. But the town is still working through your master plans. We got some preliminary information and the depreciation variable seems to be okay relative to that. But I bring that up because that's an area we'll want to track over time, that as you finalize master plans, your capital improvement plans, we'll want to check what that investment needs to look like and compare it to how much you're generating toward capital and make sure we have revenue sufficiency there. And then so that was one policy consideration is the funding of depreciation versus future capital cost. And then we also included a 10% kind of fund balance contribution, saying we don't want to just break even. Most enterprise funds consider a contribution to fund balance that ensures that we have enough to fund unknowns, emergency needs, or future identified capital improvements. So we have that brought in to the analysis as well. Once we identified those variables, then we had a benchmark for which we could evaluate. So we could say, okay, what are our revenues? What are the expenses we're allocating? Let's look at our surplus or deficit, then bring in a 10% of total expense and isolate any deficit that we might be calculating on each of these funds. So here you can see in table 3 of the memo, we are showing a deficit on standby, storm, and sewer. I will point out that sewer, prior to the JSSD fee adjustment, we were not showing a deficit here, but we've brought in that new cost allocation from JSSD. It is proportionate to the data we had, since this was all 2025 data, but we brought in an estimate of that expense, and that's why we're seeing a shift in the sewer fund that is now at a deficit. So we're seeing a need there to do something about that. The only fund that did not have a deficit is the water fund. We're showing a surplus there. So from there, what we looked at is then calculating kind of billable units using your current revenue generation. So that's what table 4 is doing, is saying, okay, if we've generated $171,000 in fiscal year 25 in revenue, and our current monthly rate is $21.83, then based on a monthly bill, then we have 655 units that were billed in 2025. There is some variation here since this is a point in time. There's going to be differences depending on when you actually look at the data, but we're comparing this, again, all of this to fiscal year 25 data and calculating the billable units. For the water system, we didn't split out the base rate versus usage rate revenues. We just brought in the usage to get an estimated billable units to kind of look at the percentage change of this enterprise fund if we were to make any change here. The other two, storm and sewer, those are all base rates, so those are pretty close to the billable units on that side. Okay, so once we had that, the billable units, we could now compare the deficit to the billable units and look at a recommended rate change. So on the standby side, we would see an increase there if we were to mitigate that deficit. We would need to go up to $34.24 per month for those that do not bring water. So again, looking at the monthly rate now, it's $21.83. We would need to see an increase of $12.41 to mitigate that deficit. That would put the new monthly rate at 34 and some change. If you bring water, then we've removed that water reservation component, and that would be a $26 charge if you bring your own water. As a point of comparison, when we looked at some other communities, there's different ways that entities will look at standby rates or wholesale rates. We saw a lot of communities have somewhere around $10 per utility for a standby fee. So at $34, you're pretty close, right? Because that's for 3 utilities. We want to keep that in mind, that while it's an increase for the standby, those that are on standby, that's for all 3, access to all 3 systems. So roughly, $11 per utility there. On the water side, this one again is just an illustration to show if you were to potentially reduce that rate, what that might look like. And we've applied it all to the base rate, assuming, we're calculating that just based on the $94.90 current monthly rate. If that were all applied there, you could see a drop there to below $80. We've got an asterisk there explaining that note for simplification here. We would actually recommend that we step into this in a little more detail and determine how we might apply that. If there are additional tiering mechanisms we want to implement, conservation policies, if we want to reduce the amount, for example, some entities are reducing amount of water that's allowed in the base rate to promote conservation. There's additional variables that you would probably want to consider in this rather than just applying that all to the base rate. But this was to give you an idea of what that might look like if you want to go down that road, and then we could be more surgical in the application of that. On the storm side, right now you're at $6. That would need to go up to $16.21. So that's a heavier lift there to get that deficit mitigated on the storm side. And then on the sewer side here, you can see it's not quite a $31 increase. The TSSD rate is I think 31 and some change, 31.50, or I don't remember the exact number there. But the reason why that's not happening here is because of the way the TSSD bills you and the way we're allocating that cost within this methodology. So some of it's being allocated to standby customers, right? Because that's part of the cost of the system. And some of it's being allocated to the sewer system. Whereas your bill is allocated purely on a different variable. So there's some redistribution going on here, which is why it's not a full 31 or $31 per month pass along. That's also an area you may want to look at, and that would probably require some discussions with, did I say, yeah, TSSD? Or is it, yeah. So looking at what that might look like from a billing perspective, that could influence this utility. But here again, we're showing essentially a pass-through to get that cost brought up and into the sewer enterprise fund. So across the board, we're seeing, again, standby increase, a storm increase, and a sewer increase, but that could be potentially mitigated by changes to the water utility. another thing I would caution here is, again, you'd want to look at your policies revenue relative to overall fund balance over time or future capital investment. If, for example, if you had a substantial water infrastructure project coming down the road, you may say, well, we don't want to maybe pull rates down that much because we need to build up more cash to be able to fund that infrastructure that's 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Rather than saying, we're going to issue debt when we get there. Let's build up cash now and let that rate stay where it is so we can start building up more healthy reserves. So that's something to think about, which is why we're saying there's potential here, but it requires further exploration to look at that one specifically. There are some other elements that we highlighted here. So we've talked about the tiered element for water. There were some additional considerations that Katie brought up relative to some subdivisions, the Perch subdivision and Golden Eagle subdivision, which we have not addressed directly in the analysis. The stormwater system, there's also some elements relative to the way you bill right now that may need to be changed. Right now, it looks like you're billing based on billable meters, whereas apartments are not billed per door necessarily. That could add some additional revenue. When I calculated that, it could be around $10,000. So it's not gonna fix the problem on the storm side, but it would add a little bit more revenue there. So that we did highlight that, but that has to be addressed as you look at your billing system. And then the JSSD sewer charge, we made some assumptions relative to that. Again, using 2025 demand data and kind of calculating what the bill would have been in 2025 based on the number of units. And that's what's billed in the model. And then we'd also need to drill down into how JSSD is billing you and how we're assessing that, and over time tighten that up. So there's some additional discussions that could happen between the town and JSSD as it relates to the way that's billed. So in summary, again, we've highlighted where there's the need to make some modification and where there's a potential for reduction or additional policy consideration relative to fund generation. Ultimately, the model is funding to about $250,000 in depreciation across all utilities and about $200,000 in additional allocation with the 10% fund balance distribution. So cumulatively, we're looking at over $400,000 of potential allocation to capital or fund balance across all 4 utilities. So while that seems like a lot, it's not relative to, well, in this case, the storm, sewer, and water enterprise funds. So it's across all of those. So let me scroll back up. This is that, so we can see that summary table. But this is how we'd achieve that. So seeing those increases. Alrighty, I've been talking a mile a minute. So I'm happy to dive into specific questions or discussion items as it relates to some of these findings.
Well, I guess, as someone who's not smart enough to speak accounting, what I'd like to do is paint a picture of what I'd like to see. And then I'd like to get your opinions on that image if I could.
Yeah.
So with respect to water, I'd like to see a base delivery rate that is the same for all houses in Hideout. It's got to cover all the plumbing, maintenance, repairs, billing, accounting, legal, all that kind of stuff. And that would be equal for all the houses. And then with respect to water usage, I'd like to see a tiered pricing system where maybe 0 to 4,000 gallons a month is rate number 1, 4 to 6 is rate number 2, 6 to 8 is rate number 3, and above 8, rate number 4. And the goal here would be to encourage conservation. And that the bills would reflect somebody's actual use, which they have some control over. And then with respect to storm and sewer, I'd like to see us pass on the costs from JSSD plus our inspection, maintenance, repair costs with a 10% for unforeseeable type reserve things. And that's kind of my vision I'd like to hear your opinions on that vision, whether or not you think it's appropriate, you put a different twist on it. I'm curious about your opinions.
Yeah, I think that's great. Especially as it relates to water and the passing on of expense. That's the intent here, is that if and that's what we're trying to do with sewer, right? Is pass on that cost. And if there are additional expenses that need to come from JSSD or that have not yet been identified, then yes, we want to pass those directly through. We haven't received any additional data on pass-through costs for water or storm. But I would agree, yes, if there are costs there, then they should be passed directly through and distributed based on the methodologies that we've identified. And then as it relates to the tiering, I would agree 100% there that yes, entities are looking to establish a base rate that truly addresses maybe universal demand across the board as part of that first tier, and then looking at tiering structures that promote conservation. So those are definitely policies that should be considered.
Or are those things, like for example, the rate tiers and the accounting for the base delivery rate and the storm sewer, along with their associated maintenance, repair and whatnot costs, is that something that your firm could prepare? And if so, how quickly could you prepare something like that?
Yes, yeah, we could definitely work on that. Typically, Storm does not have most entities that I've worked with, it is a flat fee. So those are on the Storm system, that is a flat fee. Sewer, it can vary across the state where there's a base and a production rate, but most will, because there's not a lot of variation. Well, there is. I mean, there is a difference there, but it's difficult
JSSD
to
just
measure.
bills us for the, flat rate for
Yes,
each
exactly.
connection.
Yeah.
So
No, in this case, again, so storm and sewer would likely stay the same, but it's on the water side that we'd see that variation. And we can definitely help look at what your tiering looks like, look at your usage data and determine what the trends look like in how water is used in the system, and then help create a structure that makes sense relative to your system specifically on how you want to tier that. Again, to promote conservation, allow for base usage. A lot of entities are shifting away from even having usage built into a base rate. They essentially say you're given a base rate that covers the kind of the fixed proportional allocation of the system. And then we start tiering all usage. So we allow tier 1 to be the lowest cost, and that caps at like 75% of your average usage or your indoor usage, and then we scale it up from there based on what your system looks like.
how long does it take, do you think, to turn that around from this report to a report that would include recommendations on the tiers and the numbers for storm and sewer and water?
Yeah, it wouldn't take too long. Again, on storm and sewer, we can, once we get any additional expenses, we can plug that into the model directly and recalculate those numbers. On the water side, Katie's let us know we can get the demand data and we can process that over the next couple of weeks. We actually talked about trying to get something in March back to you guys to look at this.
Yeah, and Jonathan, this is Katie Shepley. We have talked to Ralph about that and having LRB do the tiering of water. To Fred's point, storm and sewer are flat fees. We get a flat fee from JSSD, not related to usage. So we would not be able to do a tiering for either of those. But for the water, we are going to do that. And we have all the historical information for the last 3 years. I'll provide that to Fred. And we've discussed it, and they think they can turn it around for the town council meeting so we can get the fee and rate schedule approved in March and start billing these rates in March.
Because we would need to see that not on the day of the meeting. You need to see that in advance so that we can all review, consider, and digest that. That's why I asked this question. We can't just be receiving that report on the day of the meeting or the day before. That's entirely problematic, I think, for us. Yeah.
We agree with that.
Yeah, this is Brian, especially since, the Infrastructure and Public Safety Committee that Jonathan and I are now co-chairing. One of the things we're looking at is infrastructure planning, and I believe we have a zero capital improvement budget today for public infrastructure. We have O&M, but we don't have anything for capital improvements. And that's something I've talked to Dennis about. We definitely, they're working on the master plans. We take the master plans and figure out, okay, we prioritize what we need to do. I already know of one that, I put in the plan over 3 years ago for a pressure regulating valve for the top part of shoreline because their water pressure is way too low. And those valves cost like, I don't know, 3 years ago, they were 50,000, then you gotta put them in, right? It's probably at least $100,000 expense to put in a valve, right? So it's not cheap. So it has to be budgeted for. So one of the things I wanna make sure we do when we come up with the rates is we put enough in there. I don't know if that 10% is enough, right? To cover what the near term, even the near term, next 5 year capital improvement needs are. So that's something we really need to have this information at a time before we change the rates. Right?
But Brian, we'd also want to say that we would relook at these rates on a yearly basis, exactly for that reason. Because we're including all the depreciation at this point in time, but you're right, we don't have a capital plan to insert in here or to make the recommendations. So maybe in a year or two, we will have that and we will revisit these rates at that time. High recommendation to revisit on a yearly basis. Platted property changes on a monthly or quarterly basis. So that means a lot of our platted standby will go to COs and they'll start getting the water, sewer, and storm, and we'll get less in standby. So we definitely need to update it for price changes from JSSD, capital plans, and or changes in platted property.
Well, JSSD was one of our big issues because they weren't charging us for the sewer cost for JSSD above 248. They had left that off their charges for a number of years, and that's why there's a big bump in that.
Okay.
And so actually we got away with not paying
right.
our fair share during those years. But now they're, well, you gotta pay your fair share. We didn't realize that. Before we get off, and we'll probably have to get a move on, Fred, I did a quick back of the envelope math, and it looks like I came up with $21.32, not counting the standby fees that the average homeowner would have to add to their monthly bill. Where do you stand with that roughly? Based upon the numbers.
Does that include a reduction to water?
That includes the reduction on water, correct?
But it would be based upon your tiering though, Ralph. The water will not be the 79.12 for everyone. We'll have a base rate and then you'll have a usage rate on top of that. So it will vary depending on how much water you use. So you really can't do across the board that.
Just trying to get a rough benchmark here. Are we in, at this point, a $21.32 increase? Or what's the range on that? What could be the upper and lower bounds on that? So as we're here in a public meeting, I think we're gonna have to start charging the increased rates. They will be passed on to bills. So our folks who live in town will want to know where they stand at some point soon, because they're gonna see new bills.
Yeah, I can double check that, but I guess if sewer's going up by $22. Sorry, I think I said $28.60, but that's the current monthly rate.
You got $22.70 for that.
Yes, and then $10.21 for storm, which is about $32 or $33. But if you add a $15
$78 for the water, and then that leaves you with a net of about $17.13, and then I think is there a 419 here somewhere? The difference between 2602 and 2183. But anyway, we're in that $20 range.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. If you did reduce water and then increase the others. But again, that discussion relative to capital improvements and the unknown is something really important that
Obvious.
the council will need to wrestle with, right? As if you give it away now and then a year down the road, we say, well, geez, we have some huge capital needs in water. I wish we had that back. It's much harder to pull that back, right? So my recommendation, but again, I'm an outsider. I don't pay the bill. I would let that sit for a minute and say, hey, let's update our rates for standby storm and sewer. Let's get our capital plans done and revisit that and let the public know we are going to evaluate that capital need before we make adjustments there.
Well, we have to make an adjustment on the sewer because
Yeah.
JSSD on a monthly basis is charging us $25,000 additional for the cost of the sewer. So that has to be a minimum adjustment,
Yes.
which is, right?
So can I just real quick, I know you're wanting to move to the next item, but can you let me know what that scenario that you wanted to see relative to base and tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 on usage?
Well, my initial thought process, and I'd like to hear your opinions on this is, rate number one would be 0 gallons to say 4,000. And then rate number two would be 4 to 6,000. Rate number three would be 6 to 8. And rate number four would be above 8. Those are not, cast in stone. Those are just my initial thoughts for which I would like to hear your opinions.
Yep. I'll start with that. So look at the data. That may be a little tight, right? Because depending on your usage, tier 1, you may have the majority of your water, for example, use. We want to make sure that the majority isn't falling in tier 4, right? If based on the tiering structure, if it looks like everybody's hitting tier 4 with all of their use, then that suggests we're being too tight on that allocation. So yeah.
Fred, what I can do is share with you a prior study that was done with various rates like Jonathan was proposing. And then that coupled with the usage by resident for the last 3 years, I think we would be able to come up with a basically saying, maybe from 0 to 2,000, you charge the base rate plus $10 for every 1,000 units they use. And then 2,000 to 5,000, you charge the base rate plus $25 for every 1,000 gallons they use. So I'll give you an example of a previous study that was done after people had looked at the Hideouts gallons usage for residents for the last 3 years. So I'll send that over to you and we can schedule some time to look at it.
Perfect.
I know, again, I know you want to move on. May I make a comment? This is Dennis, the town engineer.
Go for it, Dennis.
Yeah, first of all, I highly recommend that you move to a tiered water rate. There's been a lot of discussion about that. When it comes to stormwater, I know with the stormwater fees that I'm familiar with, $16 is pretty high. But usually they're somewhere between 5 and 10, 11, 12. So, that's pretty high. And I think what we need to change, and with the data that was available to Fred, where we just have meters, we don't have anything else to base that rate on. That's probably the best they can come up with. And it's just because they don't have the information. I think really what contributes to your storm runoff is impervious area, which is, your rooftops, driveways, sidewalks, parking lots. And so, I think, and Fred did put this in the memo, that, recommending a stormwater fee that's based on impervious area. So that way, maybe whatever you determined that ERU was for a single residential, what their impervious area, and then multiply that by the impervious area on like a commercial development. When that comes in, it distributes those that can, it makes those who contribute more to the system, they pay more to operate the system. So again, I would recommend that we look at something like that too for stormwater rates rather than just basing it on meters.
And town council, we did talk to Dennis about putting together a proposal for us to be able to determine the impervious area for a single family home versus the impervious area for a multifamily. Because at this point in time, we're charging the exact same amount for the multifamily as we are for a single family. And they have 17 units to each apartment, but they're only being charged one storm fee. So Hal Dennis has agreed to do a study for us so we can charge appropriately the multifamily units as well as the single family units. So the multifamily will go up and the single family may go down. So that will also impact our storm rate. And if we could get that study done by March, that would be ideal. But Dennis, I'm not sure if you said you could get it done by March.
It depends on, I mean, I think that's probably somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks. It depends. We're putting a proposal together, as you said. If that's approved, we can get started on that, and we can make that a priority. You have to look and see what who's available, how much time they have. But yeah, we can make that a priority. We have people who can work on that, and we'll crank it out as fast as we can.
And my assumption then would be that the single family homes might be lower than the 16, but the multifamily homes would probably be tenfold.
Right. Those would be higher than what your single family homes would be.
Sounds like, hold on here. I think we gotta move on.
Okay.
We're not gonna take
Yeah.
any votes. Anyway,
But
let's move on.
thank you.
There's a lot of homework clearly that needs to be done before now in the next meeting. Let's coordinate some of that homework so we get the tiered rating, we get any capital facilities costs, et cetera. We map these out and we have at least one part of the plan in place before the next meeting. Not sure we'll get to all the stormwater stuff, Dennis, but so job is homework between now and March. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Fred, that was great. Really appreciate it. So I'm sure homework is gonna come in your domain as well.
Yeah.
Jan,
We're moving 5,
we're gonna move 5, right? Because
Right.
it doesn't make any sense now.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
for the tiered rates and
Okay.
a big thank you
Which is-
to LRB
Main
because
fund.
we've been working on this for a year. And Dennis's numbers, this is obviously very complicated and it came together all at once.
Right, so we got a lot of homework and next meeting we'll address the rate study, the variable approach to it, and then the rate schedule. The only thing I had on that was every month that we don't have a new rate schedule, we have to pay JSSD $25,000 a month, and we can either try to recoup that in a higher rate for the last 4 months of the fiscal year, and then roll it back, or we're gonna eat it. So we need to be thinking about that additional 25, and that's why we need to move quickly on at least the sewer.
I don't have a big appetite for eating.
All right, so moving on here, I think this is on your shoulders, Paul.
Yep, OPMA.
Yep. No, then. So we're not doing, when you guys are not going to adopt the fee schedule
Now we're moving that to March.
to March? Okay,
Can't do
sorry.
it.
Okay, Maria,
Yeah, let me get it up.
sorry, that's what you guys just said. I just wanted to make sure. So neither, it's So, we're gonna just do a quick, overview of the Open Public Meetings Act. You're required to do this training every year. Sometimes, there's one that they do on the Lieutenant Governor's, website, the State Auditor's website. That, is, just very high level, basic. But maybe after you do tonight's training, you could go on there and see how you do on that, because you probably could just take the test and pass with flying colors, but you're not required to take the test, you just are required to take the training. And
Trying to share, sorry.
but I can just kind of, while she's pulling it up, I can go over the concept and the intent behind the Open Public Meetings Act is transparency in government, and the idea is that the public can see you during your deliberations and your discussions of matters. And I think that that's super important because I think there is a view that stuff happens behind closed doors and that the public isn't allowed to at least watch what's those deliberations. I always give the example, years ago, a neighbor was, wanted to get a conditional use permit to expand his, house kind of closer to the road. And, we went to the hearing and my husband said, well, what's the point of this? They've already decided this anyway. And so that's not, you don't wanna have people have that attitude. I said as a city attorney, no, it's not supposed to happen that way, but that's a perception. So having robust discussions about things in the public meeting is, shows that it's not something that's been predetermined. The idea is that, for hard decisions, you're doing it out in the open. And so that's very important. So the purpose of the act, as we just kind of talked, is to deliberate and make decisions openly. Openly means in a public meeting. And of course, there's a whole chapter of the Utah State Code on this. And you can go next one. And it applies not just to the council, but to any local administrative advisory executive body. If there are two or more individuals, if it spends, distributes, or is supported by tax money, and has authority to make decisions about the public's business. So depending on, we're going to talk about advisory. We are always, my agenda starts at 7. I know there was some talk of talking about the advisory committees. So the idea is, if the public wants to attend, I don't know that it rises to the level. Usually, if they don't have the ability to spend money, then it doesn't necessarily apply. So it just depends on how you want to do that. I know you're gonna have people reporting to the council, so people will know what's going on with those committees. A meeting is, so it's a very broad definition though of who, it definitely applies to the planning commission, for example. A meeting is, if there are 3 members or more, and convene means not chance meetings. If for example, if you're all skiing Deer Valley and you all happen to be on the same lift, the 6-pack or quad, and there's more than 3 of you, just don't talk about town business. You can bump into each other, you can see each other at the Smiths, that's fine. Go over for cocktails, but the idea is that you're not conducting business while those happen.
I just want to make a comment, but when I checked the law, it says if you have a quorum or more for that body, it should be a public meeting. But for planning commission, since we've gone to 7 members, it's now 4 instead of 3. I
Correct.
just want to make that,
Yeah,
it's not a hard number of 3, depends on the quorum for that body.
right, that's correct. And for the council, it's a little, it's 3, but then there's been a lot of discussion in the municipal lawyers forums, does the mayor count as since the mayor only votes if there's a tie, but it seems that everyone views it as, yes, the mayor does count. So that's why the mayor and 2 council members are also a quorum. The flip side is too, that if you don't have a quorum, you can't hold a meeting. Right, so that's happened before, not so much here, but in past situations where for some reason somebody can't show up and you don't have a quorum, and they say, well, can't we just conduct the meeting anyway? Everyone's here, but you can't. So you can't have the meeting if it's not. And I always just remind you that you can't, just go back 1 second. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That to be careful with email, text chains. If you don't want to have a meeting via email, right? So if everyone's on it and then you start saying, I like this proposal or not, that's why Maria and I and Jan often will just blind copy the council so that to avoid that reply all. Although I have to say, in the last 10 years, I think that had, people don't seem to, I remember there used to be a time where people were always hitting reply all, and that doesn't seem to happen quite as much. But still, the idea is not to comment on the substantive matters through email, so you're not having a meeting by email. But, and it's okay though for scheduling, that's okay, but substantive matters. A doodle poll does rise the level of the meeting. Okay, thanks. So we just talked about this, we can, just already explain this slide, so we can go ahead. And then I also like to just remind you, this isn't so much the Open Public Meetings Act, but a companion, chapter in the state code is the GRAMA, 1M, it's the Government Records Administration, I should know exactly what it's.
Administration Management.
Thank you, okay. So, and what that act does is it means it's a companion one, because what it's saying is all of your emails, all the documents of the town are public under certain circumstances. Like the base is everything is public. And then of course there are certain times when they're not, right? Like a real estate, offer or things that would, personnel things, that type of thing. They're different categories. But in general, your emails are going to be public unless there's like attorney-client privilege, that type of thing. So expect that anything you put in an email could end up on the front page of the park record. And I like to give it an even text. And a good example of that, I don't know how many of you were here in Utah when Mark Shurtleff was the Attorney General, but there was a big to-do. His emails were put on the front page of the Salt Lake Tribune. So there was a kind of scandal that happened and texts were put on the front page of the paper. So just consider that. So bottom line, citizens are not entitled only to know what the government decides, but to observe how and why every decision is reached. Okay. Location of the meeting, is kind of City Hall. You have your set location. It can only be changed for like a site visit. So right, if we went out to see Elkhorn Springs, that's permitted, of course. If there's an emergency, if this room was flooding or something, we would find another place. And, you can have it somewhere else, like if we kind of had a meeting at Black Rock the other day, but once you've set the spot for the meeting, you can't move it around. And I heard the reason for that was that a long time ago, a small town in southern Utah would have their meetings and then they would move the meeting midway through and go to like a local cafe or something. And so that's not allowed anymore. Okay. And of course, the meeting is always going to have public notice. You can have electronic meetings. That's, of course, really evolved since 2020. And there are certain noticing requirements. You need to have an anchor location. So if, for example, all the council was online, that's permitted under your guys' resolution, but you would still need someone at town hall so that if the public wanted to come and watch, they could. Okay. And then, reasons so your meetings are in public but there are a few enumerated reasons why they can be closed. And the big ones that, I think we end up using are personnel, reasonable imminent litigation. Real estate has been one. And then of course, like security, criminal misconduct. So, most of them require it also to be recorded, but no minutes are usually, our practice is not to take minutes, you could, but they're not required. But recordings are unless it has to do with personnel or, security issues. So for example, a closed meeting that was held recently was recorded.
Are those recordings grammable, if that's a word?
They're protected.
What they be?
But eventually, if the reason that it's closed is no longer a reason to protect it, then they can be made public. So for example, a real estate purchase, something like that. That could come back. You'd look at it case by case. And if there was a lawsuit or something, the judge would be able to listen to the closed meetings. Okay. So as you all probably know, we have to give notice at least 24 hours before the meeting of the agenda, the time and place of the meeting. The packets, are not required to be part of that notice, but obviously we're trying to get them to you a week before. And the agenda has to be specific enough for the public to know what's going to be discussed. So, and we post it on the public notice website and the town website. And actually I should update this, and also at our location. So I don't know, Maria, where you do it, on the front door or something?
We're the next to it in the little,
Oh, right, there's like a box.
Yeah.
Also we do an annual meeting schedule, as you know, so that's when we just changed it to 5 p.m. Okay. And, let's see, so we just talked about that. And then public comment, I'd like to just talk about this a little bit because, actually, as things have progressed, there are less, state law is requiring less and less public hearings. Usually public hearings for land use items only have to occur at the planning commission. We do have, though, the requirement at the council for public hearing for, what's the one we just had one. Anyway, oh no, anyway, so we do have certain ones that are public hearings here, but there's a difference, you know, you guys allow for public comment at the beginning of the meeting for things not on the agenda. It's up to you whether to allow the public to speak to things if it's not an official public hearing. Generally, I think if people, well, it's up to you, you know, it's up to the council and the mayor to decide whether you'd wanna, you know, if the public came and were interested in something. We have had development agreements, that type of thing, where they are public hearings, zoning, that type of thing. I think that's what it was. It was
rezone.
I was just blanking on, because I knew we
Sorry.
just had one for the fire station, for example, there was a rezone. And we needed to notice that as a public hearing, so that's a public hearing. Those legislative land use things are public hearings at the council level. Under our code, under state code, they're not required to be, but our code does require them. So, I put this, it's often, the reason I put it in topics not on the agenda can be raised by the public is if someone mentions something during the public hearing or public comment portion, you can discuss it, but you can't take action on it. So.
Because there's no notice.
Because there's no notice, exactly. But you could direct staff or direct to put it on for the next agenda. Okay, next one. And we have minutes and recordings, as we've talked about, for the meeting. And they must be approved, the minutes have to be approved. Draft minutes have to be available to the public within 30 days after the meeting. They are different, jurisdictions have different levels of detail in the minutes. I think Hideout has picked a really nice balance. I find them pretty readable, comprehensive enough. Some places just do like the motion at the end and then you have to like go back and listen to it. I like ours are pretty good. Okay. And you can have emergency meetings for notice less than 24 hours, but it has to be an emergency, obviously. And I would suggest just, talking with your, city attorney about whether or not it reaches that level. Okay. And violations can be, are a class B misdemeanor, if someone knowingly or intentionally violates it. And the action taken can be voidable if the body violated the act. That's the link to the auditor's kind of course. So it says pretty high level. And violations of the Open Public Meeting Act are done by the Attorney General's office, I believe. So, that's kind of a quick overview. If any questions, I'm always happy to answer. I know, if not, just remember transparency, I think is the biggest deal. And, it's important to do the public's work in the public.
I don't have any great summary. I think I've heard that. But one thing I would love to hear eventually, and we'll put this on the next as a future. I'd love to hear where where we differ from Utah's, from the state law. So whether it's on this or something else, in what I would call important key topics like this, and where we vary one way or another. We can't be any less stringent, but where we're more stringent, where we have further definition. Can we do that through Unicode directly? Meaning, could we, because all our code is in Unicode. And is there a mechanism to just do a compare and contrast against corresponding code with Utah code?
I think it would be, I don't know, better than I do the capabilities of AI, but the Utah code, title 10, which is the municipal land use code, and then title 3 is the municipal code, are pretty extensive. I don't think a compare and contrast. There's some verbiage that's exactly the same, but a lot of it is different, especially since our code was written back in 2008-ish. Initially, and then we did a big rewrite in 2020, but the state code continues to evolve. But
I wouldn't do it for every chapter. I would do it
No.
for sub chapters or major.
but I
chapters.
think, Thomas and that's something I could probably do for you, although you're transitioning, or your new attorney, maybe that's a great way for them to learn your code. Well, it's mostly in the land use, it's mostly in municipal code. It shouldn't be that hard to figure out. And that would be a great, kind of chart to have for you. So. Happy to help direct or, help the next attorney kind of know where to look.
Well, I'm always asking the question, are we in variance from something or other? What does this town do versus us? Obviously, that's different because it would be interesting to know at least the baseline against what the state of Utah has.
Yeah, there are a few things, as I mentioned, like rezone, we do a public hearing here. Sometimes I think we just have 10-day notice, which is what the state requirements are. But it would be a good practice to look through that, because I think sometimes things do get lost even though it's in our code, we might not see it, so.
We'll take 5 minutes before the next item.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same, yeah. Good time for a quick break. Thank you, Polly. So take 5 minutes, 8:35. And we don't have a lot left, actually. You. Oh, or she's on.
He's online right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, we're back in session, at just what we said, 8:35. And our next item is the appointment and approval consideration for our legal counsel, new legal counsel as city attorney. And we had over the past month, since the last meeting, we've had a committee of, well, the core committee was Jonathan and Tanya and Jan also participated. I did some participation. And we actually reviewed 4 law firms. Correct me if I'm wrong on anything here. Narrowed it down to 2. One was Baby and Vancott, and the other was Corbin Gordon's firm, Gordon Law. And the final analysis, and it was both terrific. All I could say, both terrific firms. And in the final analysis, due to well, for one, I think Corbin has tremendous understanding and knowledge of the local environment, which is kind of critical for us going forward. So, and obviously other great background. Baby and Vancott has been terrific, and I think Mason attended. But in any case, the choice of the committee is Corbin Gordon, and I think he may be online, hopefully.
I am, yes.
Hey, Corbin.
Hi, guys.
So before we go on too far, I have to have first of all, is there any discussion? Because Jonathan, Tanya, Jan spent a lot of time going through this. So any other council questions or any input that Jonathan or Tanya would like to bring in?
Tanya something. Oh, she's online. Okay. I don't have, I'm totally.
I'm online. Sorry, Jonathan.
Well, any perspective you two would like to add, so to speak, as council and kind of lead committee members and attorneys who obviously were appointed for the right reasons,
Well,
Yeah, I will just say that I thought we ended up with 2 fantastic candidates. Very tough decision to choose between the 2. I want to thank Mason for work he's done for us over the last several months. Corbin, I think it was great to spend time with you. Having your local knowledge here in the community, I think is going to be invaluable. So I think that certainly tilted me a little bit.
Thank you.
Well, again, I would echo what Tanya said. It's a really tough choice, to be honest with you. It came down to some finer points, of experience, expertise, depth of the bench that they have, personal experience of the primary lawyers. In my opinion, we could not have gone wrong either way. However, ever so slightly, the scales did tilt in Corbin's favor.
Thanks, Jonathan. Well, if there's no other questions, then I would say we need a vote. So is there a motion to appoint Gordon as our new legal counsel? Any motion to that?
So moved.
Jonathan motions. Is there a second?
I'll second if Tanya doesn't.
Okay, that leaves Carol.
Yes.
Tanya,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
Well, that's Corzette carries forward. Corbin, you're now our new counsel, and I'd say good luck because we've got a lot of stuff on our plate.
What's another congratulations and condolences.
So
I look forward to
anything
working
you'd like
with every one of you. Thank you for the privilege. I'm excited to get to know you and to work with you. I will reach out here tomorrow or the beginning of the week, and we can sit down and pick up and start moving things forward.
Well, I'd also like to say something about Polly. I think I want to thank Holly for helping this transition, asking some questions along the way, providing advice, being a great, attorney for the town. So thank you very much. And I just wish you all the success in the world for you and your family.
Yay!
And, I think we've had some absolutely good conversations, great conversations, and thank you for all your help. And I'm sure if Mayor Rubin was here, he'd probably say the same. So, thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much.
At home there.
So I've enjoyed, it's been a great learning experience over the last few years, so. I'll think of you, and luckily it's snowing now, so that's what I'm looking for.
What is it? Okay.
And Corbin, you can't see me, I'm off the camera there, but you and I should connect and we can talk about transitioning.
That would be great. I would appreciate that. Thank you. I will do so.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't expect, there's gonna be some obviously, joint communication, both with the council, myself, staff, and going forward until we have it, until you both feel that you're totally comfortable, so to speak. So, okay. We have the possible consideration and adoption of ordinance, and I think we've had this on the construction hours alignment. And I think there was one minor change on the hour, if I'm not mistaken, for Saturday weekends and holidays, if I remember. Jonathan, can you walk us through
Sure.
the red lines here?
Sure, if you could pull that up, Maria.
Well, yeah.
People could follow along. I'm a visual learner, so I always appreciate that.
It's okay.
So the first set of changes. Oh, good.
Sorry, I'm close.
Okay.
Sorry.
I just clicked on the link. For me.
I know, I think it will need to. If I can find it, I'm so sorry.
There we go. So the first set of changes were basically the whereas is to set up what this really is. And it's basically, we have two competing interests. One is, the residents want quiet and peace. And the other one is, the developers and the builders want to get things built. And there's a lot of overlap here. If we restrict the hours too much, it'll take forever to complete and we'll drag out the pain. The other way, you're either ripping off the Band-Aid or pulling it off slowly. And so the effort here is to try to strike a reasonable balance between those two competing interests. And so the next set of changes were just minor tweaks in section 1. We added any person or entity because, sometimes people do business through corporations. Number 2, again, just tweaks. You can't move or utilize motorized excavation equipment outside of the hours because we've essentially established quiet hours. And number 4, I just noticed that we go from 1, 2, 4, 5. We should probably renumber those from 1, 2, 3, 4. And then number 4 defines, what is construction work? And we kind of define it as any motorized excavation, erection, or remodeling of the exterior of any structure that would require a permit. And then number 5, there are certain exceptions. And there may be some operations, whether they be residential or commercial, where you can't complete the operation, the one kind of thing, the unloading or the erecting of a steel girder or something in the hours. And there is a limited exception when the mayor, the town council, or the town engineer can prospectively, not after the fact, prospectively authorize limited extended hours. And if there is such an authorization, it has to be posted on the work site. Number 6, this is new. It's essentially an obligation on builders and general contractors. They have an obligation now to notify their workers, their employees, and their subcontractors of our rules. Because obviously, there's situations where the people on site may not know what the rules are. So we're going to be imposing a duty on the builder and the general contractor to tell the workers on site or the contractors on site, what are the rules? And they can do that by just giving them a copy of our code. And so now paragraph 6 was deleted, old paragraph 6 that is, and it's on construction noise. The problem here is the level of my voice right now is somewhere around 60 decibels. So I think we went a little too far here. We basically said that during the permitted construction hours, whether they're Saturday, Sunday, state or federal holidays, you can't create noise that's over 60 decibels, which is roughly the loudness level of my voice. So you can't, for example, hammer a nail, you can't run a saw, you can't do any of these things. And I think that went a little bit too far.
You can paint.
Could paint.
With a brush.
Yeah,
Not with a
we
sprayer.
could probably put up tiles, but in any
Yeah.
event,
Yeah,
I think
sewer
if we're
sprayer.
gonna allow construction during certain hours, we have to allow construction, because otherwise we're, in my mind, essentially prohibiting, any construction activity, on any Saturday, Sunday, state or federal holidays. I think that when you think about the balance between, residents having quiet and the developers getting things done and getting out of the community, I think that strikes a reasonable balance to delete those noise, the 60 decibel level. It's really just about what my voice is right now. And I think that's just a tad restricted. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or anything that I can.
Just to clarify something, Mayor, just so that, is you did all pass some changes a couple month, was it just last month?
Last month.
It was last month that were meant to just make sure that all the different ordinances were matching. But Jonathan, Councilmember Gunn, has made these further changes. So this is the first time you are seeing these changes, even though you've seen this topic before. And I think his intent is to try to normalize them and clean them up even more.
So just to review the big changes that I saw were the hour difference to, I think it was 6 p.m. on weekend, holidays, if I'm thinking.
Extended from 5.
Saturdays, Sundays, and
From
holidays.
10
And
7 to 7 on.
7 to 7 on Monday through Friday, and then outside the hours of 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, obviously, on Saturdays, Sundays, state and federal holidays.
So went from 5 to 6.
Right.
And then the decibel levels went.
Are going away.
Yeah, so that was a comment I made before, was 60 decibels is way too low, like you say, it's conversation level.
My question is, and the annoyance that I hear from the construction crews is the backup beep.
Oh,
And, that can be very annoying.
The backup beepers that are like 100 decibels. Right?
Well, whatever they are.
Well, they're required to be really high.
And the backup beepers are required, right? They
Yeah,
have to be
that's
on
for safety.
vehicles
Yeah.
for safety.
Yeah.
So,
We have restricted, they cannot move those vehicles outside of construction hours. So. you will
but I
hear-
do hear them. Honestly, I check, it's like 6:45 and they're going.
Well, that would be an enforcement issue. We probably need to figure out how to, and my hope is by forcing the developer or the builder or whomever to give a copy of our rules to everybody on site, that we might get some, because they may not be aware of the hours, it's possible. But if the builder says, hey, you gotta comply with these, and they hand them a copy of our rules, and they read them, we'll hopefully get better compliance. Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, the objective here is compliance, not
Enforcement.
enforcement, but if we probably do have to come up with a case like you're saying, where you're hearing the noise outside of the construction hours, at least a way of notifying the builder or.
Take video, because the video will have the
Yeah.
time on it,
Yep.
and it'll have audio and video, and that'll be great for enforcement.
Sometimes I don't see it because I'm blocked
You just hear
by,
it, yeah.
I just hear it. So, because the rooftops or whatever block.
To enforce, we need positive evidence,
Okay.
and
And I think we still, the suggestion I made least one meeting ago, which I thought was implemented here, I think, is that we're only putting this language in one part of the code. There are two parts of the code that refer to noise, and now one refers to the other. One is the primary and the other it just refers to it, right? So that avoids the problem with document.
We're
control.
consistent.
Yeah, right, right. We don't have to duplicate language anywhere. That's a good goal to have.
One thing I'd add is I did look around at that, and I think I mentioned this last time, looked at about 10 towns as to what their standards were, and we were slightly more restrictive. We were on that. So I think, Jonathan, you're bringing it back towards kind of some range of average.
We're trying to balance the two competing interests in a reasonable way for everybody.
You're basically giving them an 8-hour workday on the weekends, right? Which should be enough. Yeah.
Jonathan, may I ask a
Yes.
question, please? I
Please do.
understand the decibel. That's a very reasonable change. I'm curious, does it address music? Because I live next to two construction sites, and hammering and sawing and everything is one thing, but the blaring music is quite another. Is there any restriction around music, or is that addressed anywhere?
I don't believe that music would be addressed because it addresses construction work.
Yeah.
You do have another, there is something in your noise ordinance.
I
for
say it's
just
probably
music.
noise ordinance and should cover that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, this is just focused towards construction.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to take a look at that, Tanya, and see what's there. There may be an enforcement mechanism. You know, if we've got a rule there, you know, about loud music. Now, again, you know, we're gonna have to take a look at it to see how enforceable it is. And if it's not enforceable, let's take a stab at tweaking it.
Okay, but you guys have probably, encountered some of that loud music at construction sites, and it can go on for hours. So that, yeah, just curious. But
Let's look at our noise ordinance
Yeah.
and see what's there.
It's 50075.
504075.
all right, thank you, Paul.
Car washes and they have no loud music. I wonder how they.
Private property, it's a little easier there. Turn it off or leave.
So what does our code say, Paul?
Yeah, I thought that this was, as construction, it says dynamic breaks. I thought I found it quickly, but I don't think I found it quickly. I have to look.
Well, we can revisit that when we get a look at it. Tanya, I'll be happy to work with you on that if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but when you started talking decibels, I was like, the only thing that's bothersome really is that music when it's going for hours. So thank you.
Any other questions I can answer or comments? I'm fine with it.
Well, if there's nothing else, then we should I should ask for a motion.
I would move to adopt it as written, except that we need to renumber paragraphs. It jumps from 2 to 4. And if we could just renumber those in numerical order, I would move that we adopt it with the proviso that we number the paragraphs in order and not skip any.
Is there a second?
A second?
Okay, Tanya,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and Jonathan.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Next topic, discussion of and possible approval of committee appointments of the mayor and council. So I've talked to all the council members in one-on-one conversations, and can we pull that page 21 in the docket in the packet? And this just outlines. It's an outline of the first of all, planning related groups, which is, largely the general plan working group and a little bit about the planning commission, but the planning commission is separate. So, we've already addressed some of that. And Polly, I found some of the email that you sent me, because I do want to address this. it was not consistent with what I saw. And so we can go back and it was I think, the term of Brad Aramet and Catherine, they did, my recollection was inconsistent with yours, but we can correct that. I think those are a couple of
Yeah, I
minor
think that
things.
when you, we should go back to the minutes, I recall that you set their, kind of, their terms when
That's
you
right.
were appointed.
And I think you reversed them.
Oh, I haven't touched them.
Oh, well, in your email, you sent to me, or you sent to someone, because I have a copy of it. Why don't we just revisit that after
Yeah,
this?
because, yeah, I
you
haven't
don't
sent
need-
anything since I haven't commented on their terms since they were.
We just wanna make sure whatever we said there is consistent to what we said, and I had a different interpretation. It's not major, but it does affect, two planning commissioners in which term Catherine and Brad, and who got the 28 and who got the 30.
Right,
Does that make sense?
yeah, we
We can go back through that, you know.
And it would be very good for you to have, you update that on, not only on your website, but to have good recorder. Because where things get confused is that if somebody resigns,
Mhm.
the term, they are replaced just for the remaining of their term, just like you guys are on the council, right? So.
But there were some issues, remember, with the chair who thought her term was was moved to someone else and we resolved
Yeah,
that.
there was a mix up on the website, so they had put her as her term not ending when it was ending. So I can work with Maria before I go.
Yes, I wanna make sure, because I've had a couple of residents say, that I think it was Mr. Rutter, he said it's inconsistent, and he was right. So
Yeah,
let's make sure that, I'll work with you on any of that, make sure we get all that, so that's the planning stuff. I know you sent me an email as well, Brian. I don't want to address that right now, because I'm not quite sure how I'm thinking about that. The chair should be critical. Brian sent an email on, the general plan and who would manage that. I wanna take a look at also some input from Jake and John. And I also wanna get some input as to what other towns do in that regard as well, just to get some, are we aiming in the right direction? Or have we missed some things that we should consider? So that makes sense, but let's just make sure that we're not off in a tangent, so to speak. And then, so four committees. Did I get that right? Four committees. The first one, which we've talked about, which also levers off of our code 1.28.030, which was the Public Utilities Advisory Committee. We're essentially renaming some of this under the guise of infrastructure and public safety. There was also, as you brought out, Ollie, there was some wordage in there where it was called the Sewer and Water Committee, so we need to make sure all those terms, and this may not fall onto you, it might fall onto Gordon, but let's make sure we capture that in the notes here as an assignment, because we wanna, just like we've been straightening out other wordage, we need to straighten this out. And then there was some wording around ex officio members, who's on what, so we need to make sure we're straight on that.
I just wanna make sure all the parties that would be involved in this, like, the building department, the
Engineer, the planning.
planning,
Yeah.
So, just wanna make sure we cover all the bases,
Yeah.
not that they have to be voting members, they don't have to come to every single meeting, but
They probably
they ought to be included.
But what we need, so that language needs to be, further.
And that was in the draft, charter that we put together, so I just pulled it directly out of that.
So, just gonna continue on. Jonathan and Brian to work together on this committee, which will potentially include other committees, like the water audit, water conservation working group, which we don't have, but we'd like to have. And then wildfire risk mitigation group, working group, which is really a separate committee, would then fall under, and then public safety and the planning planning working group with it for infrastructure. And then I threw in developer relationships from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Tanya, I've got you, we talked about the EDC and the budget committee, we expanded the words around that, and then we could have a variety of working groups. We've had a Ross Creek working group already. Not quite sure if we need a Silver Meadows one, but we may at some point, so I kind of put that in there. There might be an annexation working group. I used to contribute to the budget working group. It's one of the more boring work groups that you can possibly think of. But nevertheless, we could reincarnate that if needed. And then compliance would be in relationship to, that's so
Loud
much
music.
interest.
The music, loud music, right, Tanya?
Yeah, indeed. I'll sign up for that.
Our budgeting and
Yeah, I would.
how we're
think it's more
managing
than that.
things. You could have a compliance group as well.
Yeah.
So think about that. And then grants, I think, are really critical. Dan's been doing a really good job on, or keeping that organized. And then I was thinking community center working group, that would make sense here. Need money to create a community center. And so that would be the beginnings of that. And then Carol and I talked about expanding her role with transportation, which would also include parks and trails, or the former post committee, and transportation. I also put community center under there because I wasn't quite sure where to put it, but I think we need the money first and then, kind of the execution, the development, and the aesthetic feel and the environment would probably fall more towards, say, what the transportation community could add. And maybe both working groups become one, who knows? But that's what I'm thinking on that. And then Bob is not here and he probably has the shortest, and I told him I would, given his amount of time, I would help him on the events working, the communications committee events and resident communications. So, and then behind all of that is some wording that I took from various towns, melded them together, passed them through Polly, and really about how the organization is, the committee structure itself, and keeping meetings open. I'd say one of the most important parts of the next couple of pages is in the report. So, I don't want to make this overly burdensome, but I think every major committee from the council perspective, at least, should be thinking about how they've organized their sub-working groups and how much resources they expect to consume in the next year, whether it's direct financial, whether it's, I need 50 hours of engineering, I need 20 hours of planning. I think particularly for the infrastructure group, that's going to be critical. How much legal time do we need, So we need to budget that because the budget's coming forward. So I've got two major asks on that, and that is by April 1, which is the beginning of Q4, as we get really down and dirty with our budgeting, that all the committee chairs submit their kind of pro forma budget. Doesn't have to be down to the dollar here. We're talking about the expectations, but then we would roll that in with it into our finance folks, and we'd have a better idea of how much we're gonna spend because, the wildfire committee is asking for, for good things, but they cost money, so, does that make sense so far? Okay. And any requests for staffing beyond, I think, 20,000, which is, Jan's authority, shall be, given back to the council. So if you've got any big budget items, just to ask you quickly on the transportation study, do we have, we won't know about grant funding on that until March 1?
Sometime in March.
Cause that's critical too. Okay. So I don't, so any questions so far before we kind of, I'd like your consent on this, so to speak.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Go for it, Tammy.
Is there, on the budgeting piece, is there any expectation that the budget stays somewhat in line with prior years? Or how do we think about the budget? And maybe this is an offline discussion, but I just don't, give us some guidance on how to plan for that.
I think we take it like a business, and that is, what's my, what could I minimally live with? What's my ideal, what's my average ideal? And if you want to add some things, it just could be a list of items and, kind of the pie in the sky, what could I do with these additional items? And I think, just like in business, when you're asking for any item, that, the justification is, this is going to accomplish this for the committee in the town, and go from there. And as you're building out, the pie in the sky stuff may fall over to the next year. Does that make sense? I mean, really just a basic spreadsheet with those maybe 3 columns and reasons behind each item and what the return to the town is. And I'd be happy to help you or anyone else on my thoughts with that.
Great, thank you.
So, I mean, we could start with just a basic spreadsheet, to be honest with you, what gets you to, what are the impact? What are you working backwards from what I talk about all the time in business? What do you want to accomplish? What are the key resources that you need? And what time frame do you need those resources in? So, does that make sense? Any other thoughts or questions?
The minimum viable product.
MVP, yeah. Okay, so no further questions. Should we go for the advice and consent of council? Any motion to move this forward?
I'll move to approve. I'll second.
Carol,
Yes.
Tanya,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Okay. We're almost through this. We have, it looks like I'm up next as well, town council retreat overview. I think we were all there, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I believe everyone in this room and Tanya were there, if I'm not mistaken. So I would love to hear any thoughts from anyone else as to what they thought. How the retreat went and whether we should consider some new things next year, or we should even maybe do an interim workshop along the way sometime in the 6-month juncture, so to speak. So any thoughts from anyone?
I got please go ahead.
Okay, I don't think that the maps had a whole lot of stickies on them, so I was kind of disappointed. People were talking and some of us were trying to capture their thoughts and put them on stickies. But people looked at the maps, they actually started to look at the maps in advance, when we had that break, and then a lot of people went up.
So the stickies didn't actually stick, is that what you're saying?
No, people didn't fill them out. I mean, were you aware of that or not? There were
I
a
noticed
lot
there
of
was
conversations, but not, it didn't
Not
get on the
captured on
maps.
the wall.
Yeah,
I
so
wonder if
that,
that's because we previously captured so many of their ideas. I don't know, I just
there
wanted.
was a lot of talking.
Yeah.
I mean, I moved from map to map and, listened to the conversations, and I kept saying, put your thoughts on the stickies. And people didn't do it, so, and then it ended kind of abruptly. I mean,
Yeah,
it
we
was
didn't
just
really give them instructions to do that.
to do that, yeah.
So I think that's the reason why. The other comment,
So that was general plan. So
On the
I think,
general plan,
I think we
yeah.
should get back to
Back to
Jake
a
and
retreat
John,
part,
because
yeah.
we have one more session with them, right? So I'm not sure what's involved with this next session, but that's a good comment to get back to actually, it was just Jake there, John didn't make it, right?
But there was a secretary person there, I thought, maybe not. And the other thing that I asked him for, and I don't know if we'll get it, but you know, the maps were huge. And it would be, I asked him if he could reduce them to a point where we could put them in a folder. I mean,
I asked him the same thing the last two meetings, so I've got some things and I've asked him for, actually, I asked him for, give me what you have so we can keep all this stuff, you know?
right,
And Jan, I still hope we can, cause you know, we're paying for it, just like in anything, we should own it.
he told me he could reduce them. And I said, you know, like something that we can have.
Actually, Rachel asked him last Friday if he could just create, they could be big, but create zoomed in areas like Silver Meadows, right, on one map. And Ross Creek and maybe Wild Horse on another one, right? So because the problem was the icons were so small, that huge overview, right? Everything was on the same scale, which was very high level. And that was causing a lot of questions I heard from the personnel. And Jake said he couldn't do it on that short notice. So I think that's something we should, like Carol said, and that would also make them easier to put in the booklet, right?
Do we know when the date of the next,
We haven't said it yet, and I think with the changes in the planning commission, we kind of need to find out who is the lead in the planning
Right.
commission and just.
so we're talking probably the end of March or something like that.
Yeah, probably.
I wouldn't expect anything sooner than that anyway. Okay, those great comments. Anything else during the day? We had two panels. We had my boring speech, and we had the general plan. Any comments about the facility, the panels, anything that
I personally would like to have seen the retreat portion extended, maybe start sooner in this case. Panels were good, but I'd like to see some working sessions after that. Some
Exactly,
actions that
yeah.
we take.
Yeah,
Or-
it wasn't really a retreat.
I know.
It was,
Yeah.
it was, you know, like
Yeah.
a couple panels,
So it's very informative,
right?
but I'd like to see a more collaborative working, maybe split up some working groups and tackle some
I couldn't
problems.
agree,
right?
yeah, more, that's.
And maybe we could take action, we decide, make decisions, then take actions to say, assign these actions to these people and do this by a certain time. I wanna see, you know.
Here's the problem that I think we experienced was we tried to do a lot in one day.
Mhm.
We should have never had the general plan that.
At the same day,
On
yeah.
the same day, because you're exhausted, you know, it's like, and all, you know, the state of the town address, then a general plan for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
You know, you're exhausted by 7, that's a full day.
Yeah.
So we, you know, so I think, next time around, maybe we have a workshop in between now and, or after the next general plan. Maybe that would be a good time for the workshop because we will assimilate all the information from our 4 sessions on the general plan, plus a report
Mhm.
that they have to, you know, our general plan, which is a document in and of itself. So if I was gonna think out in the future, we do, you know, that we finish up the general plan and then we go to the next level. We bring back a retreat, maybe that's in, you know, June or something like that. Does that make sense, Jan? Okay. Any other comments? Well, then, we're not doing the Utopia presentation and we have no minutes, so we are at a point where we can adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to
I
adjourn?
move we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
And all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
No.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thanks, everyone.